Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 303 Pereira vs. Prochazka 2. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I watched the recap show of the Saudi Arabia card. I apologize for not being there. This is the big one. I wasn't missing this one. For those a lot of people asking, I was at a softball tournament. I think it was called Ponytails in the, I don't know, park or some shit like that. my daughter's team ended up we played 6 games in like 90-degree heat. My daughter's team took second place. I'm very proud of them. They ran out of steam at the very end, but it was a tough battle. That said, I'm hot. I've been out for like 12 hours in the sun, but yeah, I thought about pulling out, man. I really did. But when you're the biggest star in the MMA world, you never pull out.
No.
I mean, you got to think about it. I don't want to think about me, but I want to think about the people. I mean, people make plans. They plan way ahead of time, make sure they can get to their preview show. And I don't want them to miss out on those opportunities, because they're rare occasions.
Yeah.
And like this card, I signed up to do this. I'm going to show up because, I mean, just like this card, no one pulled out, right?
Yeah, you don't let down the side. I mean, like 50,000 people from Rhode Island already bought tickets.
That's right.
They don't.
like no one pulled out of this card, right?
Oh my goodness. Well, since Keith is talking and kind of making jokes around it, obviously the biggest story from a macro level about UFC 303 is that this was to be the return of Conor McGregor. It was going to finally be the coaches match from last summer's season of The Ultimate Fighter. Michael Chandler, the most patient man in MMA, had been waiting and waiting and waiting. And just like Lucy yanking the football from under Charlie Brown, he loses it again. You gotta, on some level, you feel for the guy, but then on some level, there's a little bit of the frog and the scorpion here. And for those of you that don't know that are listening, the frog and the scorpion, it's that old fable where, there's a frog and a scorpion by the side of the river, and the scorpion says to the frog, "Hey, give me a ride across." The scorpion's like, "No, you'll sting me and I'll die." And he's like, No, I won't, dude. Like, I'll just, it'll be cool. Just give me a ride. Finally, the frog is like, "Okay, fine." So scorpion hops on the frog's back. Frog starts swimming across the river. Halfway across, the scorpion stings the frog. The frog's like, "What the hell, dude? Now we're both going to drown." And the scorpion goes, "You knew what I was when you put me on your back." Like, at this point, if you are a fan, if you are a promoter, if you are a prospective opponent, and you are banking anything on Conor McGregor, I hesitate to blame the victim, but you knew what he was. Because on top of everything, claiming he had a toe injury, starting to no-show the pressers where you knew this was coming. Last night, he's on camera at Bellator, visibly coked out of his mind, just hanging out and having the time of his life, living his best life. Yeah. I'm throwing shade right now, but I'm going to finish this little rant, and then I'm literally not going to talk about Conor McGregor again until he is ready to walk into a cage. Like, I'm done. I'm more interested in the fights.
Well, we got to at least mention him once a show so we can put it, hashtag Conor McGregor in the show notes and get our numbers up.
Of course. So does it still help us to mention Ronda Rousey? Because I'll talk about her too.
Yeah. So I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. So the way I do, and I showed someone, I went to the Bellator card a week before, and one of the guys, he's actually a listener. He's a media member. He's a really cool guy. He asked me, like, "Damn, dude, how do you do? How do you keep track of everything?" And I said, "Well, I keep notes on all the fighters, and then obviously I watch, I rewatch and try to add notes. But what I do is I pull up like a Word document. I make a Word document for each event. Well, I've had 303's Word document started months ago, and not months ago, but maybe about 6 weeks ago. My 9-year-old son, who never asked me about MMA, he don't give a shit. He's 9. Yeah. He comes to me and goes, "Dad, do you think Conor McGregor is going to win his next fight?" And I was so proud, and I was like, even when we think that other people are reaching that level of Conor and maybe pass him, stardom, it's not even close.
No.
When my 9-year-old son, my 9-year-old doesn't know who Alex Behead is. I want him to. I think he should deserve it. But he's asking me about Conor McGregor. And with that said, this card is loaded. It's a deep. I shouldn't say that. This card is what you want. Like the UFC did the best thing they could possibly do to replace Conor McGregor. So when all the news broke out about Conor coming out and all this, I was at that Bellator show. It was the I keep calling Bellator. I apologize. You know, it's the same Bellator staff. That's why PFL. Sorry, I apologize. The PFL where they were doing the women's division and the heavyweights. Yeah. So it was that card about a week ago. So everyone was talking. A week and a half ago or something. Everyone was saying, they replaced this, replaced that, and I said, there's not a single name besides maybe John Jones taking a fight that would have felt like the proper replacement, including how big of a star Alex Payton. And even if you replace John Jones somehow came out of the blue and took a fight on this card, it still would feel like a little bit of letdown. Now, I want to be very clear. When I say that, I'm not talking to the people who watch this show. We are the hardcores. If you're going to watch probably going to be over 2-hour breakdown of the show, you're a hardcore. But and people have heard me say this so many times, you never cater to the hardcores. Everybody who watches this show is watching this pay-per-view. But my friends who ask me, hey, who's going to win the fight? And I go, can you at least click on the thing and go to the very end and give me a click, Yeah. That guy is disappointed that Conor's not on the card.
Agreed. Like best possible case scenario that was in any way realistic would have been John Jones saying, okay, Tom Aspinall, you want it? You get it. Show up. Like,
it is still to the casual would still be a letdown. Now the hardcore would be going crazy.
Oh yeah,
and there would definitely be a casual appeal to it with John Jones on the card.
Mm-hmm. But even there, it would have probably lost some shine off whatever the pay-per-view number is going to be. Like, a bunch of tickets from Dublin are still getting canceled.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So this card to me is still a very good card. Like I would give it maybe like a B-, and it has what I want. Like it has a star. I always want guys who are marketable. And Alex Payton is that star, and he's become even more. Like every time he takes a fight, short notice, broken toe, this and that, he becomes bigger and bigger star, more likable. So it has star power. It has depth. Like when I go down to the prelims and I'm interested in guys on the prelim.
Dude, Ricky Simone is in the opening fight.
There you go. Like it has depth, and then it has prospects. Like prospects, I like guys to watch. You have Payton Talbott, who like a lot of people think is a future star. They have that. The reason why it's kind of like two reasons why I'm only giving like a B-. It's International Fight Week. This is supposed to be. I mean, I know this year we had UFC 300, but generally speaking, International Fight was the biggest card of the year.
Yes.
Even if you do like what they call like the pillars. Those ones, like every so-called, you do the New York card in November, supposed to be a massive one. This should be as big of them. And I feel like it's missing like one or two like top 15 ranked fights. Like Macy Shillan is on the main card. Like that is a prelim fight. A good prelim fight.
Well, and the funny thing is it's a potential title eliminator just in a terrible division.
Yeah, you know what? You're actually a good point. We complain about stuff like that, and then we complain that these lesser divisions don't get enough shine. Then when they do it, then I complain more. So I'm a hypocrite.
But I like this card. There's a ton of good stuff from bottom to top. Again, Ricky Simone, he's on a little bit of a skid, but he still feels like a top 15 quality fighter that might still have some left in the tank. And he's literally the opening bout. Like we had some addition by subtraction. We at pretty much the last minute added Tsuruya to this card. Might be the highest upside person to come out of this season of Road to UFC. He might be the next Tetsuro Taira. We'll talk about that in a few minutes and find out. And in terms of bout order, I know that you still have yet to pick up the mantle and do your assigned job, which is putting these bouts in order. But whoever did it,
I'm on summer vacation.
But yeah, whoever is doing it in your place did a pretty good job, because the bathroom break is definitely it's well defined by putting the Arlovski, Buday, and Waterson-Gomez Robertson fights back to back. I mean, that's more than a bathroom break. That's a bathroom break and maybe a smoke break, and even like a smoke break. Like if you smoke like a hookah and it like takes you a while to empty that whole chamber, you got your time. There's not too much to complain about on this card. I commented when we previewed last week's card, the Saudi Arabia card, that was shedding bouts in the middle of our preview, where literally between fights you pause me and you're like,
yeah,
Melsik Baghdasaryan just fell off the card, and I'm literally just crossing out notes and moving stuff around.
It was like the next it was the next fight up as we were previewing it.
Yeah, this one, your co-main event is the only thing that really shifted over the last few weeks. And I said last week's card was like previewing the card was like trying to describe a melting ice cream cone in real time. The co-main event of this card is like when you put an ice cube on a hot griddle and it just kind of like skitters all around and
butter. Oh, when you put butter on it? Yeah.
Exactly. It was supposed to be Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. Then about a month ago, Khalil Roundtree withdraws voluntarily because he found out he took some tainted supplements, and more power to him. It turned out they really were tainted supplements. He got a very minimal suspension because you still are responsible for what you put in your body. In steps Carlos Ulberg. So we have Jamal Hill versus Carlos Ulberg. That's still sensational. A couple weeks later, Hill pulls out with knee injuries. I mean, walking around at 250 pounds probably had nothing to do with that. So in steps Anthony Smith. Then just 9 days after Smith steps in, Ulberg is out. So now Smith is in that fight. It is now, as of yesterday, the 22nd, Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze, who is going to make at least a one-off return to the light heavyweight division. And that's going to be our third fight from the top on this card.
Yeah. So, but then you said that, obviously the co-main event, then they shifted when Jamal Hill got taken off the card. They shifted Ortega and Lopez, who suddenly was announced, to the co-main event.
Yeah.
And obviously you said, that's the only fight that really got shifted. We've already covered the main event being canceled. So because I know some people like to nitpick, like, oh, dude, what are you talking about? The main event got changed. Like, obviously, we've already talked about that, so he was moving on.
Right. And it's not like the matchup ever changed. We never heard much about them trying to find a replacement opponent for Michael Chandler. The fight just was gone. Whereas the Hill versus Roundtree fight went through literally 4 different iterations over the last month or so. Any other general thoughts on this one before we jump right in?
No, again, like I said, international. It doesn't feel like an international fight card, but this is. I'll give the UFC credit. This is the best they could have put together under the circumstances. This is still very good quality. Yeah, absolutely. First up at UFC 303 is a men's bantamweight clash between Ricky Simón and Vinicius Oliveira. Simón, the 31-year-old Washington State native, is 20-5 overall. He is 10-4 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He's currently on a 2-fight losing streak. Fought most recently back in January at UFC Fight Night Ankalaev versus Walker 2, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Mario Bautista. Prior to that, you have to go all the way back to last April, where he headlined UFC on ESPN 45 and got knocked out in the 5th round by Song Yadong. Prior to that, he'd been on a 5-fight win streak that saw him cruise all the way into the bantamweight top 10. He, I'm sure, would like to prove that he's still top 10 material and still a factor in future title considerations. In order to do that, he will have to get past Oliveira. 28-year-old Brazilian is 20-3 overall. He's 1-0 in the UFC since joining out of season 7 of the Contender Series. He fought on the Contender Series last September, made his UFC debut in March at UFC Fight Night Rosenstrike versus Gaziev, where he knocked out Bernardo Sapai in the 3rd round with a flying knee. Odds on this one, Simón is pretty heavily favored. He is minus 225, Oliveira plus 175 on the comeback. Keith, I know that stylistically you like Ricky Simón. I mean, you're a fan of wrestle boxers. He is as pure a throwback wrestle boxer as you'll find in the UFC right now. At age 31, does he have what's he have left? Like, how interested are you in kind of what goes on with Ricky Simón from here on out? Yeah, he does have a lot of miles. Like, he's an older 31. He's been in a lot of fights, been in the UFC a long time. So I'll say this: you're absolutely. This is a freaking banger to start off the card right away. Like, I love that, and I think he's still a good athlete. Yeah, he's very physically strong. Like you mentioned, he's your classic wrestle boxer. For a guy who's, like, he's 31, but like not all 31s are the same.
No.
I still like his output. He's got good output. His hands have come, a long way since he's first debuted in the UFC. He's got quick hands. He attacks with combinations. He does well to slide in the pocket and unloads big shots. Targeting the body is a big part of his game. He will eat a shot due to his lack of head movement. Like he's not the best defensive fighter. He also has like a willingness to brawl. He loves to get in the pocket and battle. He showed he has power. I mean, go back to like the Jack Shaw fight. He showed power in that fight. I like his kicks, hard calf kicks. He's actually one of the few fighters that check leg kicks. He's a solid wrestler. You mentioned he's got fast entries. I love like his reactionary doubles against Jack Shaw when Jack Shaw was trying to open up on the feet. Good top game. He has the mindset like if he puts you in the back, he does not mind to like stall it on top. He'll work inch by inch to get to a better position. Though in fairness against Song Yadong, he did struggle to keep Song Yadong down, but like Song Yadong is so freaking good. He's when you mentioned he's a classic wrestler, he's also a classic like submission wrestler. He loves the head and arm choke, the classic like old school wrestler move. Against Mario Batista, another good fight. He gassed a little bit in that fight. But I will say, like I put a note that he gassed in that, but that was a really high-paced fight for only being 3 rounds. So Oliveira's like fun. He's a very aggressive striker, unorthodox fighting style where he kind of throws some weird angles. I mean, the guy's a wild man. He goes in there, he wants to take your head off. Great power. He's got 15 knockouts. You can go back to like his KO on the Contender Series. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. Now, he will load up and try to end the fight with every single shot. He has a big kicking game, especially from the southpaw stance. He throws really hard body kicks from that stance, mean calf kicks. He tries like dumb spinning attacks. He loves flying attacks. I mean, go back to his flying knee of Sopai. It was one of the scariest ones I've ever seen. I mean, it was nasty. This guy doesn't care about defense though. Like he hangs his hands low. He wants you to try to test his chin because he's going to try to counter with a big shot. He can sneak in a takedown, but he doesn't look for it that often. But when he has got some takedowns, he's got 2 subs on his record. What I've seen of his people haven't challenged him in his wrestling, but what I've seen is his takedown defense has been fairly solid. This is a massive step up in competition for Oliveira. Like I don't know if the UFC views Ricky Simón as like on the back now. I know done. Simone's still I think he's well-rounded and he's crafty. He still fights at a pretty good pace. I haven't seen enough of Oliver's game, his defensive wrestling to prove to me that he can stop takedown entries from Simón. So until he shows me that, I'm going to take Simón. Give me Simón to implement a lot of wrestling and win a decision.
Yeah, I'm with you here. Oliveira is a whole lot of fun. Like for as long as this experiment lasts, there's going to be highlights. And highlights is what I kind of hark back to and I feel like I say this about a lot of debuting fighters in the UFC or fighters that are within their first 2 or 3 fights, where if you look back at their regional tape, it is full of just insane highlight reel finishes, but you worry that they've developed habits that will not carry over well to when they're fighting higher level opponents. For Oliveira, through his regional fights in Brazil, in the Middle East, all the way through to the Contender Series and the Sopai fight, where, he's not really taken on a top 50 bantamweight yet. And he's about to take on a top 20 bantamweight. I think this is where the rude surprise is going to come. Because, Ricky Simón can be caught and hurt early. Like his first loss in the UFC was when Uriah Faber, of all people, just caught him with his hands down and essentially plunked him with 1 shot. But that was a low percentage outcome for a fight between Uriah Faber and Ricky Simón, even in 2019. And Simón has improved since then. He's improved defensively as a striker. He's become just a little more composed and defensively sound. Like there's always the chance that Oliveira could give us a Masvidal versus Askren moment where he just times Simon's first double leg perfectly and starches him, but I'm not banking on that. And outside of that, this really does favor Simón. It's Simón against a tall, long-legged guy who throws a ton of kicks and just generally a ton of flying and spinning stuff. Simón should ground him easily. And while Oliveira's, I agree, his takedown defense is surprisingly stout, I don't think it's up to the task of keeping Simón off him, especially in the early going. even if Simone starts to tire out late, he is a relentless wrestler when he turns to his wrestling. Like, he's a guy that's good at chaining the takedowns. He's a guy that even if somebody sprawls properly on his first entry, their job isn't done, and 15 seconds later they might be on their back. It's stylistically, it's just a matchup that really does favor Simone. Give me Simone by a pretty dominant decision here, even if, again, all the wrestling tires him out a bit and he has to hold on, or if things kind of slow down towards the end. Next up on the UFC 303 undercard is a men's flyweight matchup between the debuting Rei Tsuruya and Carlos Hernandez. Tsuruya, the 22-year-old from Japan, is a perfect 9-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. This will be his UFC debut, but he comes in 3-0 in the most recent Road to UFC season and as the outgoing Pancrase flyweight champ. So impressive experience for somebody as young and as early in his career as Tsuruya. He is stepping in as a replacement opponent, though not especially on short notice, for Cody Durden, who is supposed to be on this card fighting Carlos Hernandez. Hernandez, 30-year-old from Chicago, is 9-3 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of the Contender Series. He has alternated wins and losses throughout his UFC run. He's coming in off a loss. Last fought back in December at UFC Fight Night Song versus Gutierrez, where he got knocked out in the second round by Tatsuro Taira. Odds on this one, Hernandez, apparently as the designated stepping stone for Japanese prodigies, comes in as a massive underdog. Tsuruya is -500, Hernandez +375. Man, poor Carlos Hernandez. Poor Carlos Hernandez. He had been scheduled to fight Cody Durden, and that fight was scrapped all the way back in early April. So I don't even think early lines were really out, but my guess is that he would have come in as a moderate underdog to Cody Durden. It probably would have been like Durden -180 or Durden -200. Instead, he has to take on another 22-year-old Japanese whiz kid, and he's a 5-1 underdog again. Obviously, the temptation is to compare Rei Tsuruya to Tatsuro Taira. Just, undefeated whiz kids from Japan in their early 20s. There are certain similarities. Like, they're both surprisingly well-rounded. They're whizzes on the ground, but, solid strikers as well. Tsuruya doesn't have quite the frame of Taira. Like, Taira, as soon as you look at him, you're like, oh, for as long as that guy can continue to make flyweight, he's going to present matchup problems to people. He's like 5'8" or 5'9". He's got a big wingspan with muscle on his frame. Tsuruya's a little stockier, and I don't think he's quite as fluid an athlete as Taira. Like, he's still a plus athlete in one of the most plus athlete divisions in the whole sport, but he's not quite Taira level. But what he has that I've seen that Taira doesn't really at this point is a mean streak. And that's not the end all of everything. And it probably won't matter against Carlos Hernandez if the fight goes like I think it will, but it's something to keep in mind for the future. I mean, this is fighting when you get down to it. For every George St. Pierre that's, like a perfect gentleman out there and a finely tuned athlete, there are plenty of guys that make lots of headway just by being tough and mean. Tsuruya seems to have a little of that meanness to him. Kind of like I said about the bantamweight finalists on last week's card, I haven't really followed Road to UFC, so I've only become really familiar with his fights over the last week or so. But yeah, he's the person I think that probably has the highest upside out of everybody that was on the season. Certainly more than the bantamweight pool that we kind of talked about last week. He beat good people on the way up. Ji Niushui, the Chinese guy that he beat back in February, was a good fighter. Mark Klamaco that he beat last August is a guy that I kind of figured would be in the UFC right now, or at least have been on the Contender Series. Like, he's a long time guy that's like trained at AKA since he was like a kid. He's a good athlete. He's a hard hitter. He's beaten good people on his way up. I think this matchup favors Tsuruya just because he's a better fighter. He's more skilled. He's more athletic. I think he's going to be bigger. But specifically, I think the things that Carlos Hernandez is good at aren't going to match up well against him. And just look back at Hernandez's fight with Taira, where he caught a kick early and took Taira down. like, talking about in the first round, and just promptly got swept and was in trouble with the rest of the round. On some level, like, Hernandez probably knew it was a bad idea to initiate the ground game with Tyra, but there's a world of difference. There's a big gulf between having a game plan in mind and then, again, what your instincts and muscle memory just tell you to do when the punches start flying. Here, if Hernandez wanted to kind of try and sprawl and brawl with Tsuruya, keep things on the feet, make it messy, make it dirty, I think he can make this a close, ugly fight. But I think at some point, this thing's going to go to the ground. It's probably going to go to the ground within the first 3 or 4 minutes, either because Tsuruya takes him down or because, again, Hernandez catches a kick, something like that, just can't help himself. And I think Tsuruya goes to work from there, kind of like Tyra did. I think he can make Hernandez uncomfortable on top, sweep him quickly, go to work from there, where we've seen that Tsuruya has nasty ground and pound and really slick submissions. Hernandez is a better fighter than his record looks like. Like, losing, he's lost to Tatsuro Taira and Alan Nascimento, both of whom are probably top 50. Well, Tyra's already,
studs.
Studs. Like, but they're both top 10 quality guys. Yeah. Tsuruya is, if my guess is right, another top 10, top 15 quality guy, and he's beaten, and Hernandez has beaten good guys outside of those fights. But this is another one that just doesn't favor him. Give me Tsuruya by a finish on the ground. I'm going to say it happens late in the first round. My guess would be a submission, but ground and pound wouldn't surprise me either.
So, I mean, I love flyweights, so I'm looking forward to this fight. This is one of the ones I'm really interested in. I was going to start with Hernandez, giving my notes on him because, he's been in the UFC, longer. But I'll start with Tsuruya. I mean, the guy, I'll say this. If the guy wasn't from Japan and he was from insert other Asian country, South Korea or something, I don't think we'd be comparing him to Tyra. Now, I know they're both grapplers and they're both from Japan and they're both flyweights. So there's a lot of similarities, but I just think it's very unfair. I mean, you're talking about Tyra could win the title and win it a year from now. Like, he's in the contention now. Like, he's a true contender. So I think it's a little late. I know you weren't doing this, but like, I think it's a little lazy for people to call him the next Tyra. Yeah. But there's a lot of things we like about this guy. He's 22 years old. Right away. That's like number one thing. He's like when someone like loses like Rojas, like when Rojas loses again, and people be like, what's that stupid saying they keep saying? Fraud check or some shit like that. Cash in fraud checks. Or what's somebody saying?
I mean, I know what you're talking about, but you're talking about Raul Rosas Jr., where he's taken a loss, but
and they'll be like, what did they say? Oh, he's a fraud or something like that. Yeah. It's like, I don't think it's fair to write off anybody's career until they're at least like 26. When they start losing about 26, then you can, and even then, it might be too early. But like 22, and Rojas' case, like, I don't know, freaking 14 or however he is. And plus he's got that shoo-wee-wee power, you don't forget about that.
What the hell, dude?
So, I like 22 years old. He's at that age, you continue to make huge jumps in improvement. He's a southpaw. I think he might be a little higher in his striking than I am. But I want to say this, Oliveira, you're higher on where his striking is his last time I saw him fight. Yeah. I have no doubt that he could be a completely different striker next time I see him. He throws everything hard, and he's a little bit wild, but I still think his striking is simply just to supply him chances to close the distance. Where when he gets in close, he's good. He loves to grind in the clinch. He's a good wrestler. I know they said, I think on the road to UFC, he's been wrestling since he was 3 years old. He's got good entries, fast entries. He cuts the corner really well. I like his top control. He's got good back takes. He's got 4 subs on his record already. I saw this one fight where he had this beautiful guillotine choke. He snatched it up. It was quick how fast it was. And then he had this like, they kept calling like a neck crank. It was almost like a twister he was trying to do on the road to UFC. He just didn't have it perfect, but it was still like, it was a really weird angle. He didn't have like a leg hook. He had like a body. He like figure fought around the body instead of like where you have one leg. hook leg with leg in wrestling, if you know what I'm talking, for those who know what I'm talking about. Hernandez, I like Hernandez. I think he's pretty good. He's a good athlete. He's got good footwork. He cuts angles well on his tack. He definitely wants to be the one pressing the action. I like his hands. He keeps everything tight. A lot of variety in striking. I love that he's added a step in knees to his game. I like his kicking game, especially his kicks to the body. He mixes strikes and takedowns together in combinations well. He will close the distance and clinch and dirty box in there. He will wrestle. He loves, getting to his opponent's hips, picking up and slamming them. When you get the fight to the ground, he looks to move to a better position. He's got some good back takes. He's got 4 submission wins. He's not a great defensive wrestler, and he struggles to get guys off his back. He couldn't get Alan Nascimento off his back. He gave up his back, which was a real big mistake to Tetsuya Taira, and couldn't get Taira off his back again, which, I mean, it doesn't appear like anybody can get Taira off their back. So, give a little bit of pass for that. You have to be a little worried about his chin as he was rocked a lot lately, but he's got good cardio. He'll press the action. I think the line is way off, like crazy off. Like you're putting a guy, what'd you say, like negative 500 in his UFC debut?
Tsuruya is minus 500.
That is the Taira comparison. Like you're writing that check. Like he's going to be UFC champion or he's going to be top 5 guy. Like you're proclaiming that early, like the odds makers doing. I'm a little hesitant because of something. One, I don't think it's a step up in competition. I think it's evil, like even playing field, like Hernandez is to some of the guys he's fought, but it's all the other things that surround it. The travel from Japan over to Vegas, the big lights of International Fight Week, the UFC card, all that stuff adds up, in your UFC debut. And like, it's not an Apex fight. It's in the pay-per-view. It's going to be a rowdy crowd. That matters. Plus, I think, number 2, I think Hernandez is really underrated. Mm-hmm. So I think this should be much closer. Like, I think should be like a negative 165 favorite. Now, Tsuruya, I'm still taking him at 22. I mean, he can still make huge jumps in improvement, especially with his striking game, add in the advantage on the wrestling. And then Hernandez can get a little wild and give a position. And I think Tsuruya can take his back and work him there. I really wanted to take a submission for Tsuruya. I like Hernandez too much. So I'm going to say Tsuruya wins by decision.
Well, Keith, a little earlier on this show, you said that you are hesitant to write off any fighter until they're at least like 26 years old. How about 36? How about 46?
46.
We're going to find out.
That's why you're the best. That's why you're the best, dude.
As 45-year-old Andrei Arlovski takes on Martin Buday and tries to snap his current 3-fight losing streak. Arlovski, 45-year-old, he's 34-23 with 2 no contests overall. He is 23-17 with 1 no contest across 2 different stints in the UFC. Of course, a former UFC heavyweight champion way back in the day. Since returning most recently in 2013, he is 13-13 with 1 no contest. He is on a 3-fight losing streak. He had been on a 4-fight win streak, kind of sweeping out the seller of the UFC heavyweight division. But in the last year and a half or so, things have come crashing back to earth as he has a submission loss to Marcos Rogerio de Lima, a knockout loss to Dante Almeida, and a decision loss to Waldo Cortez Acosta in his last 3 fights. The most recent of those, the Cortez Acosta fight, was back in January at the same Ankalaev versus Walker 2 card. He will look to snap that streak, not run it to 4 against Buday. The 32-year-old Slovakian is 13-2 overall. He is 4-1 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He won his first 4 fights in the UFC, went from a curiosity to a person of mild interest before running into Shamil Gaziev at UFC 296 last December, where he got knocked out in the 2nd round. So he will look to get back in the win column here. He is favored to do so. Buday is minus 280, Arlovski plus 220 coming back. I mean, Andrei Arlovski is, I don't even know where I'd rank him on the list of greatest heavyweights of all time. His career has been so long at this point that it's almost a meaningless question, because it depends on where you want to narrow down the window to.
Yeah, you got to pick a spot. This is when his career ends. There
was a time when he was one of the 5 greatest heavyweights ever. Like,
okay.
Or 10. 10. Like in the middle of his first trilogy with Sylvia, he was one of the greatest heavyweights ever.
Like, I might disagree with like top 5, but like whatever. Like it's not the worst thing to say. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I might put him 10th, but okay. Close. He's in that range.
Yeah. But he's been written off multiple times. He is another one of the guys that nothing about him in his 20s and early 30s indicated that he would be the kind of guy to have longevity into his 40s, because what were the main negative parts of the scouting report on Arlovski? He was a little bit of a head case, and he was super, super chinny. Like, those aren't the kind of people that have long careers and keep cashing checks like into the twilight. That's just, I can't speak to his health between his ears, though. I mean, he seems well adjusted. We haven't had any, disturbing stories of, suicidal ideation or anything, but he's got the same chin he had 20 years ago, but he magically got better at protecting it for a while. I mean, he put together a legit win streak in the UFC as recently as like 2 years ago. But the things that he did, like, I mean, he's kept winning fights as he crossed into his 40s by becoming just dreadful to watch, super, super low output, ultra conservative, guarding the beard at all costs. And his fights were horrid to watch, but it was kind of amusing to just see him get past younger, fresher guys over and over again. That seems to be gone at this point. Getting tapped out by Marcos Pezao was a bad look. I mean, anything that made me have to change my scouting report on Marcos Rogerio de Lima from worst ground game in the heavyweight division to worst defensive ground game in the heavyweight division.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And I mean, even getting plunked by Don'Tale Mayes, in a certain sense, there's no shame to that. Almost the only thing that Don'Tale Mayes does is hit super hard, but that's exactly the kind of guy that Arlovski was capable of snake charming just a year or two before.
That's right.
And then finally, against Waldo Cortez Acosta, he lost an Andrei Arlovski fight. Like, he tried to just do the slow it down thing, and I think he ended up losing all 3 rounds. So the last things that Arlovski kind of had going for him are gone. And because of that, I'm not sure what Buday's upside is, but I don't think we're going to find out much about it here. I see this looking a bit like the Cortez Acosta fight. Like, I expect that we'll have some exchanges at range that are low output, and it's always hard to say who's winning a round when one guy throws 8 strikes and the other guy throws 9 strikes and none of them really land with much effect. But I expect that Buday will probably be marching forward, Arlovski kind of backing up, giving him room, not wanting to get hit with haymakers, and that does make some headway with the judges when there's nothing else to go on. Like, there's a reason aggression and cage control are the 3rd and 4th things on the list. But if nobody is landing any significant strikes, you get down to those tiebreakers. Buday, obviously, as one of the most massive guys in the division, has proven to be a strong mauler in the clinch against the cage. I could see him like trapping Arlovski there, because Arlovski still willingly concedes the clinch. He's used to being able to fend for himself pretty well there, but I could see him getting stuck there and losing, like just losing sequences where Buday is just mashing him into the fence, throwing sporadic knees, like little short punches. I really don't want to talk about this fight anymore. Give me Buday to win by decision and just kind of a slow, miserable slog of a fight.
How does Andrei Arlovski still have fights left on his contract? How's that possible? And 2, like, what is his contract? Like, who's decided to re-sign this guy when he runs out of fights? Like,
is it just playing keep away because they know that he gets slotted right into like marquee fights in PFL?
Yeah, let him have him. Is the Belarus market that huge? Does he still have people tuning in at record numbers in Belarus? Like, what's? I don't. I mean,
he's like Muhammadjan Naimov. Like, everyone in Belarus like goes to a soccer stadium and watches him on.
Is that what it is? I don't know. like when you said Andrei Arlovski for Martin Buday, I just wanted to shut my brain off and just not listen to what you're saying. Like, nothing against you. Just, I'm so done with Andrei Arlovski fight. You know how? Okay, I'll tell you this. You know how bad I didn't care about Andrei Arlovski fight? I'm talking right now because I'm shuffling my notes to find where I didn't. When you mentioned the fight, I didn't go to my notes section of that fight because that's how much I care less. I'm sick of breaking down Andrei Arlovski fights. I mean, he is what he is in this moment. He doesn't do like you said. All he does, he does this and that. But what does he do good anymore? Dude sucks.
Yeah, offensively, he is the least dangerous offensive heavyweight in the UFC right now.
And listen, guys, don't be that guy. Like, oh, kid, you're so tough. Like, yes, you fucking murder me. Okay, like, yes, like you're done with a former heavyweight champion, but like. If this is a basketball game, he's that guy coming off the bench. Nobody knows. Dude, he's Robert Parrish playing for the fucking Bulls at the end of his career. Like, what was Robert Parrish doing on the Bulls? Getting 4 minutes. Like, hang him up, Chief.
Yeah.
Like he wants to be. And right now, people, how many of our listeners percentage do you think got a Robert Parrish fucking reference?
I mean, obviously, I did because I'm old, but even for me, like Parrish was. Old. Like, yeah.
But when he played for the Bulls with Jourdain and
like at the very end. Yeah.
And he's just like, what was this freaking Hall of Famer? Who was
and by that point, that dude couldn't score 15 points if you locked him alone in the gym for an hour. Like, yeah. That's Andrei Arlovski's offensive output right now.
Yeah. The dude, he wants to be a counter boxer, but he fights at a snail's pace and doesn't have the ability anymore to go hard for 15 minutes. He's like a person who walks the 5K. Like, and then like you ever see like the end of a
he just wants the t-shirt, man.
Yeah, you ever see the end of a 5K where you have a bunch of fat ladies walking?
Yeah,
and Caitlin Chikagan's cheering them on. But that's an old reference for us. Like, you ever have to like stand there and clap for them and like pretend they did something great because they could walk? That's what I feel like watching Andrei Arlovski fight. Like, yeah, sure, he's still athletic for heavyweight, but at one time he was the standard of athleticism for heavyweights.
Oh, he was the UFC was so bummed when Tim Sylvia came out ahead in their trilogy, like because Andrei Arlovski is what they wanted you to think the toughest guy in the world looked like. He was like this good-looking guy that was ripped, athletic, finished people. Yeah. Like he was a monster. Yeah.
Go back to what was it like? I think it was UFC 53 when he fought Justin Eilers, and he had the long hair, and he had the mouthpiece that came on the fangs, and he was like, he was heavyweight. I mean, that was the thing. He was the opposite of Fedor. It seemed like Fedor was this like punch ball that Like,
and Tim Sylvia was this guy with like skinny chicken legs and love handles.
But
Sylvia was a better fighter. But
but like, Arlovski looked like what you would expect the baddest dude on the freaking planet to look like, especially with the long hair and the fangs and all things. I mean, it was. But I mean, the guy, he fights behind a hard guard. He has tight inside boxing, but his hand speed is just fucking gone. I mean, he's a point fighter that hasn't knocked out anybody anymore. I took out the notes like the last time he knocked somebody out. It was like freaking the guy couldn't pop a pinball. Like
Travis Brown.
Travis Brown, exactly. And Travis Brown has been retired for like
it was over 9 years ago at this point.
Yeah, 9 years. There you go. So I mean, the guy couldn't pop a pimple right now. No. So his best avenue for victory is the clinch battle. But you said it. That's actually more like when I say his best avenue to victory, that's usually against everybody else. But that's actually a great spot for Buday. When Arlovski's in the clinch, he controls well. He's a decent wrestler. He's a decent grappler, but he's not a submission threat. His last sub, if I'm correct, was against Tim Sylvia in 2005 when he won the freaking heavyweight title.
And it was the dumbest thing ever because, it worked. But in modern MMA, if you dropped a guy at heavyweight and then dove in and leaned back for a heel hook instead of just punching him 3 more times, it was the most 2005 thing ever.
It was like Ken Shamrock on chemo. Fucking heel hook. Not chemo. Pat Smith. Ken Shamrock dropped on Pat Smith.
Yep.
Yep. At UFC 1. He was also subbed that you mentioned. Marco said earlier looks gross. And despite me saying this over and over again, like his chin is gone and his back chin, his chin looks like it's gone. Now, Martin Buday, he's not a great athlete, but he's a really big dude. For a heavyweight, he's got good output on the feet. He fights at a high pace. He's a pressure counter striker, slip and rip guy. He attacks with combinations. He lacks power though. Like, he's a big guy, but doesn't hit hard. He wants to be more pressure forward. They go back to like his Shamil Gaziev fight. He hated the pressure from Gaziev in that fight. He seems to kind of like mentally break in that fight. Defensively, he keeps his chin high in there. He loves using his size well in the clinch. You mentioned, like, he's physically strong in that. He loves dirty boxing. Go back to like the Chris Barnett. I mean, I guess that's not the best one to be like, hey, look what did Chris Barnett, and then the with knees in the clinch. Obviously, Arlovski's not built like Barnett, but I'm just pointing that out. He did get a takedown against Josh Parisian. He's got 3 subs on his record, including hitting a Kimura on Josh Parisian, and he's got good cardio for a heavyweight. So as far as prediction goes, like, Andrei Arlovski was once the heavyweight champion of the world. The guy will be in the UFC Hall of Fame for sure. But he's at the point of his career where he's a 3-1 underdog to Martin freaking Buday.
Yep.
Like, dude, hang it up. Like, go fucking. Like, he's at the age where he should be playing pickleball 3 days a week. Dude, I'd rather watch Andrei Arlovski play Tim Sylvia in pickleball than watch him fight Martin Buday. Buday's volume is going to be too much for him. I think Buday doesn't hit hard enough, so Arlovski will probably make it to the decision, but Buday wins the decision.
We head now to the strawweight division for the rescheduled clash between Michelle Waterson-Gomez and Gillian Robertson. Waterson-Gomez, the 38-year-old longtime New Mexico resident, is 18-12 overall. She is 6-8 since joining the UFC as the former Invicta atomweight champ. She is on a 4-fight losing streak and has in fact lost 6 of her last 7. She most recently fought back in September at UFC Fight Night Fiziev versus Ghemmouri, where she was TKO'd middle of the second round by Marina Rodriguez in one of the, or actually was Sherdog's beatdown of the year for 2023. Just an absolutely savage mauling that was frankly difficult to watch, even for such a jaded soul as myself. She is back, looking not to extend 4 straight losses into 5. And in order to do so, she will have to get past Robertson. 29-year-old Canadian is 13-8 overall. She's 10-6 since joining the UFC out of season 26 of The Ultimate Fighter. She's coming in off of a win. She TKO'd Poliana Viana in the second round at UFC 297 back in January. So she's looking to stretch it to 2 in a row. It would be 4 wins in her last 5. She is slightly favored to do so. She is -170, Waterson-Gomez +140. These are 2 women. I mean, they're not quite at the level of some of the people we've talked about, but they're 2 women that I feel as though we have previewed a lot of their fights in the 4 years we've been doing this show.
Especially Robertson.
Yeah.
She's got to be on our top 10.
Yeah. And this fight was supposed to take place a month ago back at UFC 302. It got bumped to this card, and I sort of jokingly previewed the fight in 30 seconds during our intro. It was kind of a serious preview, though, because...
You want to just go back to that? We'll call it a wrap.
All I said was Waterson-Gomez effortlessly sprawl and brawls Gillian Robertson and is well on her way to a 30-27 decision win when she inexplicably shoots a takedown in the third round and gets triangled 30 seconds later. I'm sticking by that as, honestly, Robertson's still best route to victory. Michelle Waterson-Gomez, she's one of the fighters that, like Derek Lewis, I've had my rant that everything you think you know about this fighter is wrong. Not you, if you're watching this, because you're probably a hardcore fan that's watched lots of her fights. But, if all you know is the Karate Hottie nickname and the highlight reel and some footage of her doing like flying butterfly kicks at open workouts, that is in contrast to what she's actually been at the UFC level, where she's had to go up to strawweight and has proven to be a surprisingly successful grinder despite being very, very undersized. Instead of the Karate Hottie, she could nickname herself the Wrestling MILF. I don't know if that goes over. That doesn't rhyme.
Nice job, man. Nice.
But but now that she's, pushing 40, has like an adorable kid and is really much more of a wrestler and clinch grinder, it would be more accurate. And honestly, for me, that plays well against Robertson, who she has been improving incrementally. But to me, she's just a refined version of what she was 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, she was a tricky and slick submission grappler who's a bad striker and lacks the technical wrestling or physical strength to get the fight to the ground on her terms as often as she would like. Kind of a similar scouting report to what you'd have on Mackenzie Dern. That's still Robertson to a certain extent. I think her striking has improved some, but defensively there are still lapses. And while, she's tried her look at 125 and 115 pounds, she's at less of a strength deficit at 115. I was kind of serious when I said, if Waterson-Gomez wants to, I think she can get an ugly sprawl and brawl, probably clinch heavy win over Robertson if she wants to use just her physical strength to keep this fight out of Robertson's wheelhouse. The question for me when I'm picking this one is, do I trust Waterson-Gomez not, again, to revert to what your instincts and your muscle memory want to do when the adrenaline starts flowing and just take Robertson down? Because there's just every chance that there's going to be some moment in the clinch where Waterson-Gomez feels the balance shift and her brainstem, without any reference to her cerebrum, just goes, okay, cool. I can use this underhook, just kind of, hit her knee with my knee, and she's on the ground, not realizing that all she's doing there is threatening Gillian Robertson with a good time by putting the fight exactly where she wants it. Even if she makes that mistake once or twice, I still think she can win this fight, because Robertson is as effective a grappler from her back as probably anybody in the division, but that's just not a reliable route to victory in modern MMA. I am going with Michelle Waterson-Gomez to fight against type. And some of this goes to intangibles and outside the cage things, because I thought there was a good chance she was going to retire after the Rodriguez fight. I thought there was a good chance that Dana White might pull the Chuck Liddell thing and be like, I'm just not comfortable booking this person anymore after that. Like, she was beaten.
Breaking news. Michelle Waterson just retired by Dana White's assignment, but they also re-signed Jourdain to 5 more fights.
Yeah. And lest we think Dana is chivalrous, don't forget that like Paige Van Zant's slap fighting debut is in a couple weeks. Anyway, if Waterson-Gomez is coming back at this point where she's 38, has nothing else to prove or achieve to anyone but herself, if she loses again, it's 5 in a row. That would put her squarely into BJ Penn, Sam Alvey territory, where I'd be very surprised if she weren't fighting for her job here. Like, if you're coming back for this, what else are you coming back for than to try to go out on a win? The best way for her to go out on a win is to actually use her kick some, maybe keep Robertson at bay. When they clinch, make sure they're clinching under her initiative and under her terms, and don't bring the fight to the ground unless you absolutely have to. If she does that, I think she wins a decision, like a not real pretty fight, ironically, but I'm picking that to happen. If she doesn't follow that game plan, she's given Robertson the chance to either A, just tap her out, or B, win rounds by having Waterson-Gomez in all kinds of trouble and on the defensive on the ground for the bulk of a round. But I'm picking Waterson-Gomez to follow a smart game plan, sprawl and brawl her way to winning at least 2 rounds out of 3.
Wow. This fight, I mean, Michelle Waterson's 38, and she hasn't won a fight in nearly 4 years. What we've seen her, she's been very inactive, obviously, and then the run she's on has been pretty bad. She's still a good athlete, and she uses her footwork well to keep her range. She wants to be all the way in, all the way out. She would jump into range and land strikes. She likes to land and then have her opponents chase her and see if they'll count. She can counter them as they come in, time them. From distance, she uses that like Holly Holmes sidekick to keep distance, and then she'll just blaze into the pocket, land a combo. So obviously her nickname is the Karate Hottie, or the Wrestling MILF, as you said. That was pretty good. I don't know how old her daughter is. I mean, I know she's really young, so you can't give her the gilf yet.
Yeah. I think he's like 7 or 8. Yeah.
Yeah. Can't give her the guilt for that. But that might be Montana De La Rosa. I don't know how old her kid is, but people like that's a guilt. That's a thing, right? Grandmother. Right?
Yeah, I don't spell it out for him, but yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
So obviously she's called the karate hottie because she has that karate background, and kicks are a big part of the game. She likes hook kicks, oblique kicks. You mentioned that despite her size, she likes to get in the clinch. She had some success against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Karolina Kovacevic, Felice Herrig in the clinch, and then done well. And then she has this judo background. She'll look for trips. She loves head and arm throws or headlocks, is the wrestling would say.
Yeah,
she's actually one of the people that's pretty good at it. But unless you're Bo Nickal, going for a headlock, I doubt anybody can really have success with it. I was surprised that she struggled in the clinch against Marina Rodriguez. That might be, Marina's a big fighter for the weight class, but it also could be signs of huge decline for Waterson. If she gets to fight the ground, she's a top side grappler, and she's got some great back takes. She had Joanna Jędrzejczyk's back in their fight. Gillian Robinson has accomplished a lot considering she's a poor athlete that is pretty one-dimensional. Her striking isn't good. She did show some improvements against Piero Rodriguez, but then she struggled with the speed of Tabitha Ricci. And defensively, she lacks head movement. She's a very hittable person. I've said this before about her. She almost turns her head away to avoid her opponent's strikes. All her striking is just to find a chance to get the fight to the ground. She shoots for a takedown. She'll shoot him often. Problem is she doesn't set him up. If she gets you hip, she does well to cut corners. I give that. She's a good, technically sound wrestler. Well, I shouldn't say technically because she doesn't set him up, but she understands the leverage and everything. But she can be very desperate to get to the fight of the ground. She'll catch a kick. She'll dive. She'll pull guard. She'll throw a flying submission, anything to get the fight to the ground. She is much better as topside grappler. She looks to control before she looks for submission. I said it before, very Glover Teixeira and no, I'm not calling her Glover Teixeira, but she has shown the ability to get the fight off the bottom, against Ricci. She was able to kind of get scrambles going. Problem is she still really plays BJJ. She's a submission threat. She's got 7 back, subs and got some slick back takes. If Waterson was in her prime, I would pick her easily. I think she's too fast for Robertson. I think she's tough takedowns. She's a striker. That said, you mentioned that you thought she might retire. I thought she was retired. We talk about fighters with 1 foot out the door. She's got more than 1 foot. She's full 2 feet out the door. She might be sending postcards from wherever the hell she's at. She's the, the one thing I like about Robertson is I know what her game plan is, and I know she'll stick to her game plan. She will put herself in the best. Oh, I shouldn't say she'll put herself in the best advantage she can, but she will try to put herself in the best advantage. I think she's going to get Waterson down a few times and control her on top. I would pick a sub, but I think Waterson's crafty. She's always been a really good grappler. So I just say Gillian Robinson wins a Gillian Robinson type fight where she's on top for big chunks. Give me Robinson by decision.
Next up, men's bantamweights take the cage as super prospect Payton Talbott looks to remain undefeated against Yanis Ghemmouri. Talbott, the 25-year-old Nevada native, is a perfect 8-0 as a professional. He is 2-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's already fought once this year. He was at UFC on ESPN, Hebus versus Namajunas back in March, where he knocked out Cameron Simon early in the 2nd round. So he will look to keep the good vibes going against Ghemmouri. 29-year-old Frenchman is 12-2 overall. He's 0-1 in the UFC. He stepped up on short notice at UFC Paris last September, stepped up a weight class to take on his countryman, William Gomis, at featherweight, got taken out by a body kick in the 3rd round. So he did the UFC a solid. They are doing him a questionable favor in return, letting him go back to his preferred weight class, but matching him up against one of the hottest prospects in the entire organization. Odds on this one are as wide as you will find in the UFC this year. The best line I can find is Talbot minus 1,500, Ghemmouri plus 900, and that is the best. You can easily minus 2,250. I see out there minus 2,000. Like there are more lines at major books that are over minus 2,000 than under. Like you have to kind of hunt to find one that's closer than minus 2,000. Talbot, an absolutely massive favorite here. Again, as big as you'll see in the UFC all year. I mean, I remember when we previewed Ghemmouri's fight against Gomez, and I said, I picked Gomez to win, but I'm mildly high on Ghemmouri. He's a decent kickboxer himself, but he's going to be undersized against Gomez, and his only real route to victory, or his only real route even to seeing the final horn, is that Gomez can sometimes be a little bit low volume. It could just turn into a real tentative thing, but Gomez outclassed him throughout, turned up the jets when it counted, and got the finish. Here, he's going up against someone in Talbot that's already passed Ghemmouri level tests. The only thing Ghemmouri is really going to have going for him here is that he is a technically sound kickboxer, and he's a big guy for the division. Like Talbot is big, Ghemmouri probably even a little bit bigger, but that's it. Talbot, the comparisons to Sean O'Malley are obvious. Just, they're long, lanky bantamweight kickboxers with big funky hair. But O'Malley is more of kind of a Israel Adesanya type sniper where, he's fluid. He's trying to draw guys out, snipe them with the one shot they don't see coming, uses his feints and strikes to get fighters to go where he wants, aims at space. Talbot is, to me, much more aggressive, high volume. He's not wild in the sense of just being like a sloppy, chaotic striker, but he's a wild man just in terms of his aggression and output. He is a joy to watch, but because of that, Ghemmouri's chances of pulling the upset here get even narrower, because even if Talbot doesn't get the finish, he's not going to lose rounds. He's going to be all over Ghemmouri from the start. Ghemmouri's probably going to look a little bit overwhelmed. Talbot took on a guy in Cameron Simon in his last fight that is he's taken some losses at this point, but he's still a super young guy, an explosive athlete, and Talbot really outclassed him. I think we see something similar here. I think Talbot just pieces Ghemmouri up, nails him with kicks to all levels. Once he gets him backing up, starts moving in, hitting him with punches. Once the combination punches start flowing, I think things start going downhill pretty quickly. Give me Talbot by a TKO late in the first round, and the hype will go through the roof, and perhaps justifiably so. The kid looks like the real deal.
Yeah. So if you saw me looking off to the side, I was going to the betting site because I couldn't figure out the math on what $100 bet on a Ghemmouri, how much would that pay out if it was worth throwing $100? Just, can I get a car? It'd pay you about $1,000. Yeah. I always forget that. I always do if it's negative, 2,500, that it's plus 25, but it's not like that. Because I'm like, dude, if I can bet $100 and I can win a car, fuck it, I'll try that. Talbot, this kid is freaking fun. As you mentioned, the guy is I'm worried about how far a prospect can go, but he's only 25 years old. He's incredibly athletic. He's very creative in his text. And on a side note, his freaking personality. He's a nut job. You see the pole dancing stuff he was doing?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah. As someone who's got beaten up by pole dancers for certain reasons, Payton Talbot's not the one I want beating me up. If that's, if you're into that, into that stuff, this guy, he's very athletic. He can fight out of, both stances. He fights at incredible volume. Possibly the highest output I've ever seen. The guy is, maybe there's something in that pole dancing. Dude is cardio for a full sprint for 15 minutes. The guy is nonstop moving forward, mentally strong enough to just crumble his opponents with his pressure, constantly attacking with combinations. He's accurate. He throws a lot of hard, tight hooks. I mean, he's got, he's so power with 6 KO wins already. I love his stepping knees to the body. He loves spinning wheel kicks. He does not care about getting hit, though. Like, he just walks through punches. Like, I've seen better defense on power slap than, dude does not move his head. Like, I don't know if he knows he's allowed to. I mean, he's willing to eat a punch to land a combination of his own. He's heavy on his front foot, so he's open to calf kicks. He's not a very good defensive wrestler, but I haven't seen much of his offensive wrestling game, but I mean, I've seen him to get 1 or 2 takedowns, but mostly that's not what he wants to do. But when he's been taken down, he pops right back up. He's like the Energizer Bunny. Now, Ghemmouri's a Muay Thai striker that fights out of both stances a lot. He's a counter striker. Not the best output. He tries to throw a lot of single strikes, landing the perfect shot. He's a bit of a stationary target. He loves to step back and check left hook from the orthodox stance. That's probably one of his best techniques. I like his kicking game. He's got a fast high kick. He's got a mean calf kick. He likes those John Jones oblique kicks. Defensively, he pulls his head straight back. Offensively, as far as wrestling, he will sneak in a takedown. He cuts the corner well. He has 4 submission wins. Ghemmouri's a good striker. I expect to land some shots because of the Talbot style. I expect him to land some damage shots on Talbot. But Talbot's nonstop pressure and volume is just going to crumble him. I'll say Ghemmouri does well early, but then Talbot's pressure just takes over about midway through the first, and then he finishes them in the second. Give me Talbot by second round knockout. I'll say this, though. Like, and I understand, like, Vegas, they put these crazy odds because they want you to throw some bets on the underdog and just lose your money. I wouldn't suggest taking a guy plus 1,000, but I will say this: like, negative 2,500 is just insane because in MMA he can get a cut, he can get disqualified. Like, he can be kicking the shit out of Ghemmouri and then throwing it dropping him, and then all of a sudden goes in for a flying knee and knees the guy in the head when he's down or something. So, like, the line's too big. That's crazy.
I feel like I've said that a few times. Like, nobody in an individual sport as chaotic as MMA should be much more than like a minus 1,000 favorite. There's just too much that can happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Next up on the UFC 303 prelims is a featherweight matchup between Charles Jourdain and Gene Silva. Jourdain, the 28-year-old Canadian, is 15-7-1 overall. He is an even 6-6-1 in the UFC. He's coming in off of a loss. He fought back in UFC 297 in January, where he dropped a split decision to Sean Woodson. That snapped a 2-fight win streak for him, comprising both of his fights of last year. So he'll look to start up a new win streak here, and he'll have to do it against Silva. 27-year-old Brazilian is 12-2 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. He's on a 9-fight win streak overall. He made his debut back in January at UFC Fight Night Ankalaev versus Walker 2, where he knocked out Weston Wilson late in the first round. A victory that is suddenly aging well. What do you know? At any rate, he'll look to make it 2 in a row in the UFC. He is not favored to do so, but this is one of the closer lines on the card. Jourdain minus 120, Silva even money plus 100. Keith, Charles Jourdain is one of those guys that proves that if you have, kind of an engaging personality, an impressive highlight reel, you have some memorable moments early on, you can trot along for quite a while in the UFC, even in its toughest divisions as a 500 fighter. Like, he is literally 500 in the UFC right now. He's 6-6-1. And yet I always feel like he's a fringe contender when I think about him until I actually dig into what he's been doing recently. The guy is 500 in the UFC. While he has a few unexpected results, for the most part, he's beaten the bad fighters and lost to the good ones. Tell me if you see differently. Tell me if you see any significant upside in him, considering he's still just 28 years old. And tell me who you think wins this fight.
Yeah, that's a tough question. Like, do I see upside in him? I see this level. Like, I see mid card.
Is he a win 2, lose 1, pick up some bonuses guy for the next 5 years?
Yeah, that's exactly how I see him, which is like very, very small company. Like that's a very good fighter. Jourdain, he's so super athletic. He's a very athletic guy. He can fight at both stances. Though I've said in the past, I like him better in the southpaw stance. Very high output striker. Like I go back to that Shane Burgos fight where his pace was nuts in that fight. Fast hands, explosive, really sharp left hand. I also like he likes uppercuts, which he leads with them, which I don't like. But I wish he'd kind of like work himself inside and then throw them. He can overthrow his shots, which leaves him open to counters, like kind of lunges sometimes. He loves flying attacks, though. He's got a huge kicking game, loves to end combinations with kicks, especially the high kick, hard body kicks, nice calf kicks. Another guy similar to Talbott doesn't really care about defense. As long as his opponent is fighting at a high pace, he thinks his ability will last longer than his opponent, and his opponent won't be able to sustain that pace. He wants to wear you out. He likes to get the fight to the ground. I wouldn't call him a wrestler, though, but he's a pretty good grappler. He can catch you in a submission. He's constantly looking for guillotines. I mean, he did it against Josh Kulabau. He, looking for guillotine. He caught Lando Venata. He caught Ricardo Ramos. In a guillotine. Go against Shane Burgos. He kept getting out of all the submission attempts from Burgos, though he was subbed by Julia Rosa. But I feel like that was more of a just one moment's elapse than what he is. If he's taken down, he's got a good get up game. He works right back to his feet, and he's got incredible cardio. He won't stop for 15 minutes. John Silva, he's also a very athletic guy. He's a striker. He's constantly moving forward. He likes to sit on the outside and then burst into the pocket and throw some big shots and wild shots. He keeps his hands low, but he's got good power. I mean, he's got a good left hook. He's got 8 TKOs already in his career. Best when he's getting in the pocket, bringing a brawl out of his opponent. He looks for elbows and knees inside, which I like. He's got step-in knees. He's got a quick high kick, though he does load up a lot on his shots, so he's a little easier to counter. He also hates being pressured back. He wants to be on marching forward. He doesn't look to wrestle much, but a lot of people try to take him down, and I say his takedown defense is fairly solid. He's got 2 subs on his record. He's got good cardio. I go back to the Contender Series fight where he was just throwing tons of power shots and he didn't really stop. I think both guys are really insane athletes, so this matchup could be really crazy. This could be fight of the night. I thought Silva was going to be the favorite because he's got a little bit of buzz. His entrance and everything. He brings some of it on himself. I thought I was going to be trendy and take an upset. I don't think Silva can handle the nonstop pressure of Jourdain. I saw Silva not liking pressure before, and Jourdain's going to. I expect Jourdain to keep a pace, to wrestle. I think it'd be too much for Silva. I expect Jourdain. He's such a good grappler. I think he's going to find a sub too. I say he locks in a late sub. Give me Jourdain by 3rd round submission.
Yeah, I'm. When I see a line this close, I mean, I do kind of ask myself where the upset value is. Just because I like the credit for correctly picking an upset without going too far out on a limb. But knowing from the start that Jourdain was a slight favorite, I didn't see the upset value. There is always a possibility that Silva could clock him. Jourdain is, extremely aggressive, a little bit porous defensively. There's every possibility that he just walks into a massive haymaker in the first half of the first round and this thing is over and the Silva train continues. But outside of that, yeah, I like Jourdain in this one. This is exactly the kind of fight that he has been winning. I said almost dismissively that he's beaten the so-so fighters and lost to the good ones, but that isn't exactly right. Beating Ricardo Ramos was a good win. But more to the point, the UFC realized quickly what it had in Charles Jourdain and has matched him up against action fighters over and over again. You go down Du Ho Choi, Andrei Fili, Josh Kulabau, Marcelo Rojo, Julian Erosa, Lando Venata, the prototype for doing what Jourdain has done, making a splash early on and then hanging on as a 500 fighter for the next 8 years. Burgos, a guy like the only guy in the last 10 years that Dana White admitted the UFC was wrong to let go. Like, they've matched Jourdain over and over again against other action heroes, and he's come out ahead more often than not. And part of it that you mentioned, he has unexpectedly good cardio for a guy that fights at such a furious pace. And you know, an unexpectedly slick kind of like front headlock that he's able to grab out of, you know, clinches, takedown attempts, just kind of wild scrambles. I'm with you. I think we have a wild back and forth fight. I think this is the, like, if anything from the undercard wins fight of the night, this is probably it, unless it's the opening fight. But I think Jourdain, as things get a little tired, a little sloppier in the third round, he finds that front headlock, cinches up a guillotine, and he gets his third guillotine finish in the UFC. So it is a unanimous pick for the slight favorite Jourdain by third round submission. Featherweights are up again on the UFC 303 undercard as the ageless Cub Swanson takes on Andrei Fili. Swanson, the 40-year-old Southern California native, is 29-13 overall. He's 14-9 in the UFC, or 18-12 if you count his WEC tenure in with that. He is coming into this fight off of a win. He took a unanimous decision over Hakeem Dawodu last August at UFC on ESPN, Luque versus Dos Anjos. He will look to build on that momentum, even as, again, he pushes toward his 41st birthday against Fili, the 33-year-old Californian who will be 34 probably by the time you're watching this. His birthday is on June 25th, is 23-11 with one no contest overall. He is 11-10 with one no contest in the UFC. He is coming in having alternated wins and losses for his last 5 fights. He's coming in off a loss. He fought at the Hermansson versus Pyfer fight night back in February, where he got knocked out in the first round by Dan Ige. So he's looking to get back in the win column. He is favored to do so. Fili is minus 210 as a 2-1 favorite. Swanson plus 165 coming back as your underdog. Like, one, this is fake news. I refuse to believe that Cub Swanson is 40. Just something about him has just seemed 28 forever. Like, for one, just visibly, he doesn't look that different. And even at 40, even having slowed a bit, he's still a plus athlete for the division.
And it's good for him that he's only 28, because then he can finally maybe get ranked one day, because he's never been in the UFC rankings before.
Oh my goodness.
If you knew that, according to Buckley, he's never been.
I saw that.
Mama raising a hoe over there, I guess. Whatever that means. I still don't know what that means, but okay.
I am always amused by Joaquin Buckley. I like his personality, but
he's grown on me. But he's sticking to his gimmick.
He's sticking to his gimmick, and man, it is so often that fighters will open their mouths and you realize that they do not follow the sport outside of their own next fight and maybe their teammates' next fight. Cub Swanson,
Hall of Fame. He's like, what have you ever done?
Yeah, Cub Swanson's like probably headed for the UFC Hall of Fame. He is. Well, he was a perennial.
Sorry to interrupt. If you count the fight, he is in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he's in the fight wing already.
Yeah.
He's he was a perennial fixture in the top 10 of one of the toughest divisions in the UFC for years.
For like a decade.
And, and he's another guy kind of like Michelle Waterson-Gomez, kind of like Derek Lewis, that I've had the rant. Everything you think you know about Cub Swanson is wrong. If you're watching this, I don't mean you, but seriously, coming into the UFC, if all you knew about him was like his WEC tenure, like you see him getting starched in 8 seconds by Jose Aldo. One, that's the only time, like in his entire career until about 3 years ago, that he fought somebody that had more fast twitch muscle than he did. He's normally the explosive athlete in his fights, and that was the last time he got knocked out with actual strikes. I think that's still the last time he got knocked out by actual strikes to the head, like knocked out, not like TKO'd by body stuff. Like that's not Cub Swanson. The 8-second loss to Jose Aldo is not who Cub Swanson is as a fighter. He's made a career in a lot of ways, especially in his prime, out of doing that kind of stuff to other people. He's a aggressive striker who's quick, explosive, has good power. He does have a underrated / sometimes underused ground game, like a pretty well-rounded fighter. to me, it feels insulting to call him an underachiever. Like when I say he's an underachiever, I don't mean it like he's like lazy or a head case or something. He's just an extremely talented, skilled fighter who always seemed to rack up a bad loss at just exactly the wrong time. Like he'd string together a bunch of wins. He'd get into the like outside range of the title picture, and then he'd just run into the wrong opponent or have just a bad loss at the wrong time. I am surprised that Fili is as big a favorite over Swanson as he is. Like, just you can make the argument that at 33, Fili is actually fighting as well as he ever has right now. But as well as he's ever fought is what we've seen over the last couple of years, which is alternating wins and losses against featherweights just outside of the top 15 in the UFC. Like your Danny Gay, Bill Algeo, Joe Anderson Brito types. Like he's lost to, he's lost to the better ones of them. He's come out ahead against some of the others. Yeah, he's an exciting, underratedly well-rounded featherweight. Like I do like that after having some of the most underused wrestling in the division for years and years, he's been willing to turn to it more recently. He might be well served to turn to it here. Swanson has traditionally had outstanding takedown defense. I think maybe the single biggest sign of Swanson slowing with age as he's hit 40 is that his takedown defense is not as impregnable anymore. I could see Fili getting him down, doing some work down there and winning rounds that way. Otherwise, both guys are willing to kind of settle for an outside kickboxing match. I could see a lot of striking from the outside here because neither of these guys is the kind that just feels like they have to clinch, have to close the distance and get their hands on the other guy at all costs. I could see them just kind of pot shotting each other at range. And I think that would favor Fili with volume. Swanson could be kind of stuck, looking to land one big shot, kind of bounce into range on the taller, rangier guy, land one big shot. Swanson, Jonathan Martinez has some incredible leg kicks, but I think Martinez just exposed something that other fighters could follow to success against Swanson, like his planting on his front foot, his not consistently checking leg kicks. I just feel like I don't love Fili as like a 2-1 favorite, but I do feel like most of the variables here probably do favor him. Give me Fili by decision. Just like, I think Swanson's best way to win rounds here would be with single moments of offense that they turn a whole back and forth round into an easy one to score for Swanson because he rocked Fili really bad with something, but he'd have to do that in 2 rounds out of 3 or actually finish him to win the fight. That's rough sledding against someone as durable as Fili. So I do like Fili to win the decision here.
So I sing praise to this card when we first started. This fight's more in that Arlovski range. I really feel this with 2 really faded guys who've had much better days in the past. You mentioned Swanson's still pretty athletic for a guy who's 40. He moves well. Still has good volume. He's a volume striker. Does well to cut angles and keep his head off the center line. He mostly relies on head movement because he drops his hands. I like that he works the body. It's such a big part of his game. He has that old man power. He loves to stand in the pocket and throw down. But he's taken so much damage over the years. I mean, just the fight against Duo Choi alone it would take years off. But this guy's been fighting, in WC and UFC for such a long time and in so many wars. He has always been a lower level wrestler in the offensive side of wrestling, more of a scramble guy. Also, I should say more of like a scramble grappler. I think I'm gonna disagree on his takedown defense, though. I think he is a very good defensive wrestler. I know you said in the past, I know you're not talking about present, but overall, I don't think his defense wrestling was that great. Fili, he's a technical striker. He likes to fight at both stances. He loves to counter. He's still has fairly fast hands. He's got a good long jab. Throws straight shots down the pipe. Uses feints well to set up his shots. Likes his fade back counters. He's got a little bit of pop. We saw that against Lucas Almeida. Big kicking game. He loves that like dip into one side, Robert Whittaker high kick on the other side. You mentioned he wrestles a lot, and he's pretty good at it. That he needs to improve his overall control, and he isn't a submission threat. If you take him down, he struggles to get off his back. Sadiq Yusuf took him down. Bryce Mitchell took him down. They were able to hold him down. Another thing, you talk about his durability. I'm the opposite on him. I think I'm really worried about his chin. I mean, this guy's taken tons of damage over the years. He was recently knocked out by Joey Sabruto. He was hurt multiple times by Nathaniel Wood. He was knocked dead by Dan Hige. I think his chin is shot. If this fight was 5 years ago, this would be a sensational battle. I mean, both guys appear to be way past their primes now. I'm with you. Like, I do not like Fili at a 2-1 favorite. Like, I would have favored him 2-1 over many people in the UFC at this point. I mean, I think this should be a straight pick'em fight. If this was their primes, I probably would have taken Swanson. Like, Fili, like he'd be the 2-1 favorite. I'm not picking Fili over many people, especially if they have any punching power. The issue is Swanson, I don't think he has much power. Like, I said, he has some old man strength. He still was never like a big power puncher. I think Fili uses his length with his jab, his kicks to kind of win on the feet. But even more, I think he just wins close rounds due to like perfectly timed takedowns. Give me Fili by decision, with zero confidence in my pick.
Next up at UFC 303, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a middleweight matchup between Joe Pyfer and Marc-Andre Barriault. Pyfer, the 27-year-old Pennsylvanian, is 12-3 overall. He is 3-1 since joining the UFC as a two-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He lost due to a kind of freakish injury on season 4, came back on season 6 and knocked out Osman Diaz to punch his ticket to the big octagon. He won his first 3 fights by finish before running into Jack Hermansson in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 236 back in February. He dropped his first fight in the UFC by a pretty straightforward decision. He's looking to bounce back from that. He will need to get past Barriault to do so. Barriault, 34-year-old from Quebec, is 16-7 with 1 no contest overall. He's 5-6 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as a former 2-division champ in the TKO promotion. He was their middleweight as well as light heavyweight champ. He is coming in off of a loss. He fought at UFC 297 back in January, where he dropped a split decision to Chris Curtis. Prior to that, he'd been on a 2-fight win streak comprising both of his appearances in the cage in 2023. Odds here favor Pyfer pretty heavily to get back on track. He's minus 280, Barriault plus 220 as your underdog. Keith, obviously, Joe Pyfer is coming in off of his first loss in the UFC. Prior to that, it had been full steam ahead. You know, it seemed fair to ask whether the Hermansson fight in a 5-round fight was too much too soon. It turned out to be, as he won the first 2 rounds and then lost the last 3 in kind of increasingly dominant fashion as, you know, the wily veteran Hermansson pulled away. Are we going to look back on that as a moment that Pyfer got quote unquote exposed, to use another cliche, or are we going to look back on it as a moment where, okay, a 26, 27-year-old fighter had a lot to take back from the drawing board and he corrected mistakes and never made them again? Like, which do you think is closer to the truth, and does he get it done here against Barriault?
I think somewhere in between. But
that's why I gave you extremes. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to do a show with John Franklin, and he used to always ask those like big extremes, and I'd always go, somewhere in the middle. If I had to pick one or the other, I think Pyfer's the real deal. I like this kid. You know, Hermansson's a really tough, tricky guy. He had moments in that fight too. Like, it wasn't, as the fight went further on, Hermansson had more success, but early Pyfer was doing well. He's a huge middleweight. Like, he's a big. I got really surprised that one day he's fighting at light heavyweight. He's a big muscles guy. He's a boxer that he wants to be one pressing the action. That's why he hated the pressure from Hermansson. That's something he needs to adjust to. He works behind a stiff jab. He's got good follow-up power shots straight down the pipe. He attacks combinations. His left hook is really good. He loves his overhand right. He likes to attack the body. He's got good punching power. He does throw a little too many power shots, though. I think that's something that like kind of slowed him down against Hermanson. He's got really thudding calf kicks. He can wrestle. I mean, the guy's got good entries. He's very physically strong. You grab a leg and toss you on your head. He's a slick grappler. I mean, we pointed this out last time. He's been doing a lot of grappling tournaments and grappling competitions, which I think is always good while you're not competing. He's got some slick back takes. He has a super slick head and arm triangle choke. He does have 3 subs on his record, but he struggled to get off the bottom against Hermanson. Marc-Andre Barriault, he's a pressure striker who fights out of both stances, constantly marching down his opponents, just wings, punches, a lot of output. He's got some pop in his hands, but he does load up a lot of his shots, making him open to counter. He does best when he gets in the pocket and kind of turn into a brawl a little bit. His straight right is something I like a lot. He's got a good kicking game, a lot of calf kicks. He hates being the one forced on his back for like Jung Young Park had success forcing him back. Anthony Hernandez beat him with pressure. He has a lot of defensive holes. He pillars a lot. He can wrestle a little, but he doesn't look for takedowns enough. He did show decent takedown defense against Jocko, but he couldn't stop the wrestling of Anthony Hernandez. But when we've talked about this, like nonstop, Hernandez is one of the most underrated guys fighting in the UFC currently. So I give him a little pass on that. But he couldn't get off the bottom in those fights. He's got good cardio, though. He'll go hard all 15 minutes. You asked me, do I think Pyfer's like the real deal, or was he just overhyped? I like Pyfer here. Barriault he's got a lot of volume, and that's what he's going to need to do. But Pyfer is such a cleanup boxer. He's got great leg kicks. He has more power. I think he has a huge advantage on the ground. I think he really destroys Barriault, and kind of reminds us why he had so much hype. I think he puts him out early. Give me Pyfer for my first round knockout.
Yeah, I like the pick there as well. I'm high on Pyfer too. When he hit the Contender Series for the second time, and the story came out of how Dana had basically saved him from homelessness in the year and change in between his 2 appearances, and then he was kind of very famously the only guy signed on that episode of the Contender Series where Dana White was just kind of like, be like Joe Pyfer, dropped the mic and walked out. I think that's the only time in the last 3 years that like every single winner wasn't signed off the Contender Series. I mean, that's how much Dana likes Joe Pyfer, that he resisted the urge to sign every single winner from that episode.
Right.
But it's tempting to look at them and, I mean, not necessarily like want them to fail, but just kind of like be like, okay, what's going on here other than their actual talent? But he just is an actual talent, and he does bring a lot of what the UFC wants. Like when he's in his element, he's definitely a finisher. He's aggressive. His fights are exciting. And he's young. He's still not even 28 years old. I think the Hermanson fight is one where we will look back and realize that was a turning point for Pyfer. I think he'll be a very different guy in his next headlining appearance. I've said this before. A lot of times when or at least when I say a fighter like wilted or quit or broke, we're not talking about like they got scared and wanted to go home. It's just like, okay, I'm out of ideas. I'm fighting a fighter who's less tired than me, more experienced than me. I don't know what to do here. And that happens, and fighters bounce back from it. I think that was one of those moments for Pyfer, because he was pretty discouraged by the end. Hermanson was definitely rolling downhill on him, and that was after Pyfer won the first 2 rounds. Here, we're not going to need to worry about that. There's not going to be a 4th and 5th round, and if Keith is right, there's not going to be a 2nd or 3rd. I'm kind of leaning in that same direction. Barriault's style at its best involves kind of getting in a brawl, trying to make things messy, and then, later on in a fight, he will, turn to kind of making people wear his weight in the clinch, make him tired. But he's going to have to navigate the danger zone against Pyfer to get there. And I don't think he does it either. He's too hittable. And while he's got a good chin, He's fought solid hitters throughout his UFC run, and he's only been knocked out once, and that was by Chidi Njokuani, which, I mean, Njokuani could knock out a horse with a clean punch. But you look at the people he's fought, and they're all at least decent hitters. Like, I think Pyfer's going to be different. He's going to hit him early, often, and cleanly. And yeah, I think this is a first round knockout for Pyfer as well. He gets right back on track. It's, again, the top prelim probably. So a highlight reel knockout leads right into Dana and Rogan screaming about why you need to order the pay-per-view. Just like the top prelim's supposed to work, the hype train rolls on. The 5-fight main card of UFC 303 begins with a welterweight matchup between undefeated up-and-comer Ian Garry and Bellator transplant striking superstar Michael Venom Page. Garry, the 26-year-old Irishman, is a perfect 14-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is a perfect 7-0 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Cage Warriors welterweight champ. He fought most recently at UFC 298 back in February, where he took a split decision over Jeff Neal. He'll look to make it 8 in a row in the UFC, cement himself a contender rather than prospect at the expense of Page. 37-year-old Englishman is 22-2 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC as a former Bellator interim welterweight title challenger. He made his debut at UFC 299 in March, taking a unanimous decision over Kevin Holland. Odds here, fairly close, but Garry is your slight favorite. He is minus 130, Page plus 110. Keith, I'm going to have you give me your pick for this fight, but what do you think of it as a matchup? Like, I guess it's not surprising to find either of these guys on a pay-per-view main card. How do you like them fighting each other?
Yeah, it's. I mean, welterweight, you can't make a bad matchup at the top of the divisions. Two of the biggest personalities. My one concern is if Michael Page loses, you really bury a star fairly early in his UFC. I mean, not fairly, very early. His second UFC fight. Now, based on what he's done in Bellator and his age and everything, you can't give him a slow road. I understand that. Yeah. It just that's like the negative part. Ian Garry can afford a loss much more, but you and I have talked about this over and over again. You get that loss in the UFC, you don't have the same shine as then if you were undefeated. It's just that's that really, really hurts you. And, the guy's 14-0. I think, what'd you say? He's 7-0 in the UFC. Mm-hmm. But you know how it is. Like, people on Twitter be like, oh, yeah, if Michael Page knocks him on the first round, oh, this guy I told you was never good. And
especially him, where there is such an obvious groundswell of people waiting for Garry to slip and just jump all over him in a way that there really isn't about a lot of other undefeated fighters. But you can tell that the Sharks are out.
Oh yeah. People freaking hate this guy for why. I've never understood what it was with the hate. Like, I still remember what was the thing with his wife. Like, his wife wrote an obviously tongue-in-cheek humorous book years before they met about like getting a rich husband. Yeah, the guy married a dime piece. Get over it. Like, good for him.
He married a dime piece that, by the way, I mean, she was definitely richer than him when they met. So it's not like she's digging for gold, unless she really, really believes in him as a future champ. Which, in that case, you know what? Good on her. For buying early.
And then Jeff Neal drives drunk. They ignore that, but they get all mad at him for wearing a shirt about Jeff Neal driving drunk. It's like, what? I mean. It was kind of stupid. It was kind of corny trash talk, but it was very Tito Ortiz like, when the guy Mesger's my bitch and all that stuff. If you remember that.
Sure do.
But that said, like, I'm really intrigued in the matchup. Do I think the Ian Garry Colby Covington fight was the better fight to make? Yeah, markability wise. I think Michael Page could have fought somebody else. But still, like, whatever. It's a fantastic matchup. So, Ian Garry, he's a really big guy for the weight class. I mean, he's a long and lengthy guy. He's a great athlete. He moves well, good footwork. He's a very good striker. He's a builder. He's a guy, he gets stronger as the fight goes on. I like how relaxed he is in there. He's tactical. He likes to work from range. He's got quick hands. He's accurate. I notice he really tends to measure his foes, something we don't do enough in MMA. Works behind a beautiful jab. He attacks with combination. He slips or rip well. He loves to go to the body. He's got good head movement. And I've said this before. He needs it because he kind of baits his opponent by hanging his hands low. We've seen him showing some power. I mean, we're starting to see him starch guys. He's 26. Like, he's not even in his power years yet. So that's really impressive. His stepping knees to keep his opponents honest when they crash the pocket, something I so love. It's one of my favorite things about him. Big kicking game. I mean, he uses those long legs, inside kicks, calf kicks, quick high kick. And we saw that against Daniel Rodriguez. He can wrestle a little bit. He's got a judo background. So he'll occasionally go for a takedown. It's not really what he looks for a lot, but it's just something to keep guys honest. But when he gets it down, he's good on the ground. He's got a strong top game, mean ground and pound. He does attacks and misses, particularly like head attacks. He loves darts, anacondas. Like I said, he's a builder. He gets stronger as the fight goes on. Something I give him an advantage over against Michael Page. And I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. I love this guy's confidence. Like, he has this like Conor McGregor. And I know it's unfair to like compare him because of only the two Irish guys, but the confidence where he has like this mindset where he just believes he has like this Habib or Islam feel to him, not the way they fight or this dominance or anything like that, but I mean that confidence that they see like big things happen. I mean, you're a striker and you want to challenge yourself again. First you challenge Stephen Thompson and now you're doing Michael Page. I mean, I know he didn't fight Stephen Thompson, but he asked for that fight. Mm-hmm. Like that's pretty ballsy. So Michael Page, I mean, this dude's all athleticism. And being that he's 37, that could disappear overnight. And I've been saying this for a while, and I'm going to continue to say this. I expect the fall of Michael Page to be very fast. Like, suddenly he's one of the best guys in the world, and then suddenly he's done overnight. Like, it falls apart, and you're like, holy shit, Michael Page just lost 5 fights in a row, and he looks like Tony Ferguson now, and he's done. That said, I can only base him on what I've last seen. And he's still, in my opinion, a once-in-a-lifetime level athlete. I mean, he's long and lengthy. He's a credible striker. He's a definition of a sniper. He sits back and then suddenly springs at his opponents. I mean, his flying knee over Cyborg Santos, Chris Cyborg's like ex-husband, is one of the meanest things I've ever seen in my life. You know, he hangs his hands low, which is an issue defensively, but you know, it's hard to see his hands coming offensively. I mean, he hides, like when he sits back, he hides that right hand. He hides it behind his like bladed stance. You know, people can't see it. His step back counter right is one of his best punches. The one thing I don't like about him, he looks for single strikes, doesn't really attack with combinations. He doesn't look like a serious puncher because you know, a long, lengthy guy, but he has power in both of his hands. He'll throw some fun, you know, spinning attacks out. I mean, his spinning back elbow was sick. I mean, he destroyed Kevin Holland with it in their fight. He does like these gutsy, flashy stuff, which gives his opponents chances to counter him and a chance to take him down. So that's always a concern. But he's always going to play the crowd. But because of all this flashy stuff, he gets people to be gun shy at times because he does this. So they don't know what's going on. It's just so unusual. He's an incredible kicker. I love his switch kick. I mean, go back to like mean kicks. Like he crushed Godi Yamamuchi with a calf kick in their fight. Just crumble the guy. He sets up his punches behind his kicks instead of the other way around. Like he'll throw a kick and then follow with the punch, which mostly, you know, most guys do it the opposite way, which is fun and makes it tricky. He never looks for offensive takedowns. It's just not happen. And he's a weak defensive wrestler, but he did show improvement in takedown defense, particularly against Logan Storley. But I'd still say it's a weakness. But one thing I'll say about him, you get him down, his submission defense is extremely underrated. Like he is hard to sub, and he's been in so many positions. This is a great fight. We talk about the placement at UFC 1. I understand they want to start the pay-per-view with a bang. I think this is disrespectful to these guys. I think this fight should at least be third from the top. And honestly, when you add in the marketability, now I know Ortega and Lopez is such a fantastic fight, so I'm not dissing that. It's such an incredible fight. It's my favorite fight of the card.
Mm-hmm.
But from the marketability stance, and I mean, I know Lopez is really like the new guy on the block. The UFC is really pumping, and obviously Ortega's been in the UFC and he's done so amazing things. So, I'm kind of hedging what I'm saying now, but like when it comes to media day, these are the guys who's going to say something. Yeah. Page, the headlining quote will be from one of these two guys say something.
Probably absolutely. Gary. Ortega isn't dynamite on the mic. Like, he's a charismatic guy, but he's not a walking soundbite.
Yeah, he looks good and he's like GQ guy, but he doesn't say anything. Yeah. Garry might say something. Michael Page might say something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this should be the co-main event.
If this were anywhere in Europe, not even UK or Ireland, if this were anywhere in Europe, it would be the co-main event.
That's a really good point. I mean, I know obviously they put Garry on this card because of what originally was the Conor McGregor, pairing up with that, and all the Irish people going over and trying to make him him the same star as Conor, or at least trying to he's never going to be as popular as Conor, but like getting the Irish fans are really supporting him. So when he has that moment, he comes out, he gets such a huge pop. But yeah, I think I didn't think about this, but this should be on a pay-per-view in Europe. But anyways, it kind of feels like the time I watched Michael Page fight Paul Daly at Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. It felt like one of the biggest matchups in Bellator history. They put it in freaking Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, Connecticut, which is, if you've never been there, I've been there, God, so many times. It's in the middle of nowhere. The only other thing that's there is Foxwoods 15 minutes away, which is another massive casino. But that's it. I mean, nowhere Connecticut. Anyways, back to this. I'm a huge Ian Garry fan. Like, I just like the guy's style. I like his presence. Like, I met him when he fought in Boston. And he was just like such a good dude. Good, like, not good dude, but he was very personal. Like, he'd see you in the hotel. Like, hey, what's up, man? Thanks for your question. Say, shake your hand. Like, he's much different than he comes off as. He comes off as this cocky guy. He was not cocky. He was cool. Like, I liked him a lot. Like, I'd be friends with him. Yeah. Like, I believe in him. I think of these two people, and this is not going to be a very bold thing to say, but he's the one way more likely to become UFC champion. Obviously, based on his age and everything. If he told me he would wrestle, I would pick him with confidence. And again, I think Michael Venom Page's ground game is not as bad as people think. I just think when it comes to high-level welterweights, I think Michael Page might be the worst stylistic matchup for Ian Garry. I think Gary's ego tests himself. He wants to see how he stands with Michael Page on the feet. And again, Michael Page might be done overnight, and Ian Garry might just be that real dude. Because he looks good. I mean, I don't think Jeff Neal fight was as close as people pretended like it was. I mean, he's had some problems, but Jeff Neal's fucking good. I think Page is going to be too fast. I think he's going to be too accurate. I think he's going to be too powerful. I think he hurts Garry a few times, and I think this is going to be Gary's first setback. Give me Michael Venom Page by decision.
All right, Keith, with the upset pick, the mild upset at least, in the main card opener there. I feel everything you're putting down there. And you mentioned off the top that if you're an undefeated prospect, obviously a loss isn't the end of the world. It's a little more daunting for Page just because, he's a decade older and he has a style that is so dependent on speed and reflexes that, I agree with you. Like, it's as soon as that top gear slips just a little bit and those punches that he's slipping by a half inch are connecting with him, well, it makes me think back to Lyoto Machida, where, I mean, Machida had a long career, but he had to adjust his style. Like, his karate, you can't touch me style, like, ended with him getting hit cleanly and knocked out badly a couple times before he kind of regrouped and turned into a different fighter going forward. Like, we may see that from Page, and it may be too late to, well, he doesn't have a sumo background or a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt to turn back to. Like, so I agree with you. There's an interesting element of risk for Garry here in that if Michael Page beats you, generally speaking, he makes you look silly along the way. Like if he beats Garry, the GIF that gets posted and shared around millions of times on Twitter is probably going to be Garry completely swinging at air, and Page just plunking him with like a straight right from his waist. That
punch,
like an Anderson Silva, Forrest Griffin thing that just sends him flailing, and like that's an additional bit of risk when the title picture in the UFC is a tournament and a beauty contest at the same time. Luckily, Garry's young. He's got time, even if he does lose. And I like that the line is as close as it is. I like that it shows a certain amount of respect for what Page brings to the table. I love that you mentioned that, like even among the guys you think of, the karate guys in MMA, the bladed stance guys, he is that taken to an extreme. Like he's a more pure practitioner of that even than like Stephen Thompson. Like it's a remarkable thing to behold. And you mentioned that, he will use his kicks to kind of set up his punches. It is shocking. Obviously he's already an incredibly long and lanky guy for the division, but it's shocking how much ground, like what his effective range is with those punches.
Yeah.
I remember seeing something on, like History Channel or something 15 years ago where they were showing like a medieval style fencer, the guys that would fight with the long rapier. And they were showing that with a single lunge, the guy could basically stick his steel into a target like 14 feet away, just kind of with the lunge and slide. Some of Page's punches are like that, where he hits a guy that you can tell that guy did not think he was in punching range. Yeah. And the punch you're not expecting is the one that hurts the most. And yeah, he's got an incredible highlight reel, and most of the victims of that highlight reel, the last look on their face is surprise. This is such a dangerous fight for Garry. I can see it going the way that that you've depicted it. And I think it plays out similarly that way. I think Gary's probably going to be bewildered and have a lot to adjust to. You can't, even leaving aside Gary's problems finding a camp to settle down at over the last 6 months, which again formed part of why everybody was kind of laughing and rooting for him to fail, like these rumors of him getting like booted out of different gyms in the UK. It doesn't matter what camp you're at. It's tough to find someone to simulate Michael Page for you. I expect he's going to have like some rough sledding in the early going. I trust him to make some adjustments. It's interesting considering what a deadly leg kicker Michael Page is. It's also something he can still be caught with. I look back to his first fight with Douglas Lima, where like Page did the Michael Page thing for the whole first round, and then first exchange of the second round, Lima just waited, took him ass over tea kettle with one well-placed, not even that hard low kick. Just he waited for him to start hopping around, kicked his back leg, and Page was on the ground and Lima was pounding him out. I'm interested to see if Garry does try to bring this to the ground at any point. I'm betting he doesn't do it until at least the second round. I don't have a ton of confidence in this, but give me Garry to find a way to win 2 rounds here. Just either by finding ways to land and not get hit as much on the feet, by bringing it to the ground and at least using that to like disrupt Page's rhythm and, get some time off the feet. But yeah, not a ton of confidence in this, but I'm going with Garry, the slight favorite to win the decision here. I
wouldn't be shocked, a side note, if Michael Page wins. I wouldn't be surprised if his next fight's for the title.
Oh, I mean, considering that the champ is English.
That's what I was gonna say, especially if Leon Edwards wins. Put him like, I know Leon Edwards headlining in England his next fight, but
I mean, dude, well, can you imagine anything worse than like Muhammad winning and them doing like Muhammad versus Page in England? Boo, boo. Next up on the UFC 303 main card is an extremely high stakes women's bantamweight fight between Mayra Bueno Silva and Macy Chiasson. Bueno Silva, the 32-year-old Brazilian, is 10-3-1 with 1 no contest overall. She is 5-3-1 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC as the very first fighter ever signed out of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. She fought most recently at UFC 297 back in January, where she dropped a unanimous decision to Raquel Pennington for the bantamweight title vacated by Amanda Nunes. Chasson, the 32-year-old Louisiana native, is 9-3 overall. She is 7-3 since joining the UFC as the featherweight winner of season 28 of The Ultimate Fighter. She's 7-3 in the UFC. She's 6-1 at bantamweight. She's fought once at featherweight plus because her opponent missed weight. She fought once at a planned 140-pound catch weight, but in her most recent appearance back in March, she took on Pannie Kianzad. She made bantamweight no problem. She tapped out Kianzad no problem in the first round, and that turned out to be enough to get her into this fight, which may well be a title eliminator. The odds here are pretty close, but Bueno Silva is your favorite. She's minus 145. Chasson plus 120 coming back. Keith, I'm going to say right off the bat that this fight is probably going to be pretty grindy and rough to watch. Like both of these women are grinders by disposition. Like on some level, I'm sure Macy Chasson, like in her head when she puts the headphones on and closes her eyes and pictures her next fight, she pictures icing someone with a head kick. I mean, she's the tallest woman in the division. I mean, she can throw long kicks and throw long jabs and take advantage of her huge frame. But like I keep coming back to, when the adrenaline starts flowing, she is a huge fighter who wants to be an in-fighter. She's a mauler in the clinch. She uses that big frame. She's powerful. I mean, of all the women in the bantamweight division, she's one that clearly could have been built for featherweight, but uses her size and weight to wear on her opponent, throws nasty knees, will throw elbows and little short punches. Yeah, looks miserable to deal with in the clinch. She is surprisingly nimble on the floor. Her last fight with Kianzad, that's twice that she's tapped her out, and Kianzad is a good ground fighter, and both times Chasson has taken her back effortlessly. She's like, for a woman with such a large frame and long limbs, she's frighteningly quick at taking the back in transition, and then just arms built to choke. Like that's kind of Macy Chasson's game. Like her vulnerabilities, a million years ago, she got beat in the clinch by Lena Landsberg. I think that fight would have gone differently as soon as a year after that, let alone now. Like Chasson is a different fighter, just, older, bigger, stronger, more experienced than she was then. Aside from that, I mean, Irani Aldana zapped her with a weird up kick to the liver that no matter how you think a 10-fight series between Chasson and Aldana would go, that finish only happens once. Like, yeah, Macy Chasson, like, I've been hard on her just for like the weight misses and inconsistency, but when she makes it to the cage, she's a scary fighter. She's taking on someone in Bueno Silva that I was higher on her early on in her UFC run, which is kind of funny since all she's really done is climb and actually made it to a title fight. But I don't love her striking. It just seems slow and labored. Like it's been good enough that most people at bantamweight have not been able to take advantage of it. But like she lost to Raquel Pennington by Pennington doing things that Macy Chasson is very good at, I guess is the best way to put it. Like Bueno Silva is at her best when she is the bully in the clinch and when she's the better wrestler of the two. She's a very good grappler, but she's a better top position than bottom position grappler. Almost all grapplers are, but it's certainly the case for her. I struggle to see her either getting Chasson down and doing work from top position or beating up Chasson in the clinch and winning rounds that way. If this turns into a striking contest in space, I don't love either of their striking, but I think Chasson is more likely to land hard and land effectively even there. So even though Bueno Silva is the favorite here, I'm leaning towards the mild upset. Give me Chasson to win a fight that is less ugly than Pennington versus Bueno Silva only because it's 40% shorter. But just, yeah, let me let me have Macy Chiasson to win a pure Macy Chiasson fight where a lot of it takes place within 2 feet of the cage with their hands on each other, and Chiasson is just getting the best of it. The crowd may not love it. Whoever's on ref duty, it's going to kind of depend on how twitchy they are about breaking up clinch stalemates against the fence. If Dominic Cruz is on commentary, get ready for him to, talk about how we get these stalemates because women don't know how to pummel, and get underhooks. But give me Macy Chiasson to spring the mild upset in an ugly fight.
Yeah, I was speaking of like people talking wrestling. Shout out to our boy Sean Sheehan. I saw him going after DC, saying switches don't work. I started typing my response and giving like an insight in wrestling, and then I said, you know what, dude, I just don't want to talk to about Europeans about wrestling. Like just delete. Like I was going to generally agree with DC, but shout out to my boy. I still like Sean. He's a great dude. I've listened to you break down, and you said when Macy Chiasson puts on the headphones, like, so she listened to music. Is that what's going on? Yeah,
that's my guess.
What do you think like's on Macy Chiasson's playlist?
Just some dirty South hip hop. She's like listening to like Lil Jon, or
I was thinking like soft
like
rock.
Master.
Oh, I was thinking like her listening to like REM.
I think she's the only fighter in the UFC right now with a bullet in her actual body. Like, if she listens to soft rock, I'll be very surprised. Next time I see her, I'll ask. I
just wanted to be a fan of, like, I don't know, Alanis Morissette or Sheryl Crow or something.
I mean, she is lesbian. Maybe she likes like
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I didn't want to say the obvious, but okay. Well, it is Pride Month, so I guess we'll have to put that in the hashtag to get our views up. You know what? She probably likes pink. They have like the same.
Oh,
haircut.
She absolutely likes pink.
Like they have the same haircut. They have the same haircut. So let's go with that. Or
when Pink is between dye jobs, she looks like Macy Chiasson.
Yeah. You know what? I was Cyndi Lauper. She got the same haircut as Cyndi Lauper.
Dude, Cyndi Lauper is coming on her farewell tour through town, and like my wife and I are products of the '80s. Dude, tickets were expensive. Like floor seats were like in the thousands. I'm like, dude.
Yeah, Cyndi Lauper?
Dude, she's packing stadiums.
You know what? She didn't get to go, she's not hitting the road much. I mean, it's time after time.
Exactly. Well, 72-year-old girls just want to have fun one more time, apparently.
That's right. So I don't know. We're not doing Cyndi Lauper. I can't go deep in Cyndi Lauper like I can on Leonard Skinner. I would have done much better with the REM references. Speaking of which, what fucking happened to that band? They just like broke up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
What do you do? This fight, like, this just tells you how I feel about the division. I mean, Mayra Bueno Silva earned a UFC title shot, like just deservingly so. I mean, well, besides the whole controversy with the Holly Holm fight, but if you want to count the Holly Holm fight as a win, it just tells you everything you know about the division. Like, she's not a very good athlete. She is a Muay Thai striker that fights out of both stances, and she can have high volume. She likes to get in the pocket and throw tight boxing combinations. She has good power, but she tends to telegraph her shots and load up on everything. You mentioned it, like she wants to get in the clinch though. She likes to grind. She likes to work in there. She will wrestle, and she'll wrestle a lot. She is a submission there. I mean, she caught Holly Holm with a beautiful ninja choke. She also armbarred Stephanie Egger. She's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, Mara Moroz took her down at will. But she will toss up submissions off her back. The big issue is she gassed against Raquel Pennington, but that was a 25-minute fight. This is only a 15-minute fight.
And Raquel Pennington is the type
to wear you out.
Yeah.
But I think Chiasson has that style too. But I mean, I think these girls have a lot of similar style. No, Chiasson is a massive middleweight. I mean, she's a long and lengthy girl. She's not the most technical striker, but she can crack a little bit. I mean, she wants to work from distance. And she's one of these. She wants to be all the way out, or she wants to be all the way in, like kind of like Tim Means inside. She hates being pressured. She also lacks head movement. I mean, I go back to like the Shani Young fight having success for her on the feet. Like that's someone you're Chiasson, you're higher. One of the upper ones in the division. You shouldn't. Shani Young should not be like landing big shots to her on the feet against you. When she is that Tim Means like long inside, long man getting inside game, she's dangerous. She gets in the clinch. She can like dirty box really well, knees and elbows inside. It's such a big part of her game. She also just uses her size and she'll lean and drape over her foe and kind of have them carry their weight. And I love going back to like the Aldana fight where she started finally bullying people. Like I've been calling it for years now. Like be a bully. You're bigger and stronger than everybody. Like learn how to. And she started doing that against Aldana. Now she can wrestle, and it's become such a massive part of her game lately. I mean, she took Norma Dumont down 6 times. She got Pennington down. She took Adalna down. She took Kianzad down. But she's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, she did show improvement against Norma Dumont took her down, but she worked back to her feet. She also did the same, like Penny Kenzad took her down. She worked back to her feet. I'm with you, man. I expect this fight to be a snoozer. I expect this to almost totally be in the clinch. I'm not high on either. I used to like Shillan. Like when she came off the Ultimate Fighter show, I thought she might be special because of her size. Although she was kind of younger in her career. I think she has the higher upside. But Bueno Silva is one that is more likely to stick to her game plan. And like Bueno Silva more likely, like, because Shillan win a grappling match, absolutely. Like, would it be better for the UFC? Yeah, I think so. But Bueno Silva, like, Shillan has moments where like something's missing, and I'm like, man, she just finds ways to like lose. And give me Bueno Silva just to get Shillan down. I think Shillan makes a mistake, and I think Bueno Silva locks on a submission. Give me Bueno Silva by second round submission.
Third from the top at UFC 303 is a light heavyweight clash between former title challenger Anthony Smith and short notice replacement Roman Dolidze. Smith, the 35-year-old Nebraskan fighting out of Colorado, is 38-19 overall. He is 13-9 in the UFC. He is 9-6 at light heavyweight. He made his way all the way from welterweight through middleweight to light heavyweight, where he's won enough to make it to a title shot against John Jones. That did not go his way, but he'll always have that in his back pocket. And it's meant that ever since then, win or lose, he's never really been far from the title picture. He's coming in off of a win. He fought in May back at UFC 301, where he needed just 2 minutes to hang the first career loss on Vitor Petrino. Obviously, that's a big feather in his cap. He was part of the parade of replacement opponents that I mentioned during the intro, where he was the replacement for Jamal Hill against Carlos Ulberg, who was the replacement for Khalil Roundtree. When Ulberg dropped out, Dolidze steps in on basically 8 days notice from fight night, and all of a sudden we have a feature fight featuring neither of the fighters who was originally supposed to fight on this card. It's just an ever-evolving thing. But nonetheless, Smith steps in against Dolidze, who will be coming in on short notice and basically stepping back up to light heavyweight for this. 35-year-old Georgian is 12-3 overall. He's 6-3 in the UFC. He's 2-0 at light heavyweight. He joined the UFC at light heavyweight, kind of an unheralded CIS, prospect who was already pushing 32, but he beat his first 2 UFC opponents, Kadis Ibragimov and John Alan Arte, then decided to drop to 185 pounds. And despite losing his middleweight debut to Trevin Giles, has generally had good success there, though he did lose his last 2 fights. He ran into top 10 opposition in the form of Marvin Vettori and Nasruddin Imavov and lost decisions to both of them. The most recent of those, the Imavov decision, was at the headliner of UFC Fight Night 235 back in February. Dolidze comes in here back up at 205 pounds, and he is a moderate favorite. He is minus 150, Smith plus 120 as your underdog. Anthony Smith is another guy that I feel as though we've previewed plenty of times. I feel as though even at this late stage in his career, and he is an old 35. He is a 35-year-old that has been in some incredible wars, even in the UFC. Like, he's been just through some absolute maulings. He's taken a ton of damage, even in some of his victories. He's got a lot of tread off the tires, but he's still holding it together pretty well. And even before he got to the UFC, this is a guy that fought in pretty much every other high-level promotion. Like, he was in Strikeforce. He's a guy that was cutting all the way down to 170 pounds and fighting Josh Neer in Barnes and Iowa in between major promotions. The guy has not been kind to his body over the years, but at least as of right now, he's like that 18-year-old car that has like 260,000 miles on it. It burns more oil than gas, but hey, man, it still gets you from point A to point B. Like, Anthony Smith is a guy that when it finally does all fall apart, it's going to fall apart ugly. But Smith is such a tough and such a smart guy that he continues to find ways to win. Looking at his record, I mean, he has more knockouts than submissions, but a lot of those knockouts are the result of him earlier in his career fighting as a hugely oversized welterweight and middleweight, where, you know, he had kind of like a nasty Muay Thai game. And even early in his UFC run was, you know, kind of finishing off the ghosts of people like, you know, Rashad Evans and Shogun Rua with strikes. But in the last couple of years, what's been most effective about Smith is an opportunistic submission game. And not just opportunistic. He's not just a guy that grabs a surprise guillotine choke like he did against Petrino. He's a guy that, like, you know, made Devin Clark look amateurish on the ground. Like, he has a very, very good ground game and enough toughness and craft left on the feet to get into positions where he can use that surprisingly often, I think would be the best way to put it. Like, that's what he's got left. And it's been enough, you know, more often than not. But I was surprised at the line here because I think Dolidze is kind of tailor-made for Smith to do that to. Like, Dolidze is, I mean, he's a huge guy. Even though he's been fighting at 185 recently, I wouldn't be surprised if his walking around weight between camps was heavier than Smith's. He's pretty big too, though. Yeah, but like Dolidze, he's got muscles on muscles, even at 185. He's a good, strong athlete. He hits. I mean, he's a hard hitter, hard kicker, but very bread and butter in his striking. Like, not nearly as diverse a striking attack as Smith's. He has a good ground game, kind of a. I mean, it's a bit of a brute force ground game. I don't remember, but I believe he comes from a judo background. Like, short of catching Smith cold early with a huge shot, I think pretty much every other variable about this fight kind of favors Smith. I think if Dolidze takes Smith down, I think Smith can actually threaten from the bottom. If not threaten with submissions, at least throw up submissions that give him a chance to sweep, get to top position, take the back, do like he did to Devin Clark. On the feet as the fight wears on, like, Smith has been beaten up on the feet, but it's been by strikers who are either elite in their technique, much, much bigger than Smith, or both. And I don't think Dolidze is both. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Smith kind of like outlands Dolidze and bothers him with his jab. Like, Smith was wrecking Glover Teixeira with mostly his jab in the first round of their fight. Yeah, I'm surprised at what the line is, because I do favor Smith in this one. And the last variable is that while this is a short notice thing for both guys, Smith has been preparing to fight somebody for like 5 weeks right now, whereas Dolidze got the call, you know, yesterday as of when we're recording this, and is going to step in on like a week's notice. Yeah, give me Smith, and give me him to find a way to finish this thing. Give me Smith to tap out Dolidze in the third round. And by that time, I think Dolidze is probably pretty worn out and bloody from what he's been getting on the feet from Smith. I think this is going to be another one where Smith just kind of reminds us that he's not just there for the next generation of up-and-comers to use as a stepping stone. Like, it feels like he has to show us every 3 or 4 fights that, yeah, I'll still lose to the top 5, but aside from that, like, keep these guys away.
Yeah, so let me ask you this, Ben, before we talk about. So we had 4 matchups. We had Hill versus Roundtree, Hill versus Allberg, Smith versus Allberg, and then Smith versus Dolidze. Rank those 4 to me of your interest.
Hill versus Ulberg, number one.
That's how I had it.
Ulberg versus Smith is actually number 2.
Okay.
Hill versus Roundtree, and then this one.
Okay. Yeah,
like,
I would.
Here's the thing.
Yeah, okay.
Ulberg was going to come in as like a minus 500 favorite over Smith.
That's crazy.
And dude, I again, like I was preparing to talk about that fight up until 24 hours ago. So I was getting ready to come in and call for Smith in probably the biggest upset I was going to call all year and just say, I know what you're thinking, but if Smith gets out of the first 3 minutes of this fight, watch what happens.
Yeah. I have Ulberg versus Hill the first one. I had Hill versus Roundtree the second one. I would have Smith versus Ulberg and then this one. So like the middles were a little different, but
yeah.
The point is I wanted to see Ulberg versus Hill a lot.
Yeah.
And that was what I was really interested in. Somehow Hill has turned into like this villain in MMA. So he's kind of doing it to himself, but this is an intriguing fight. We talked about the marketability and like Paige and Garry saying something on the press conference. I hope a media member pokes Smith and Payton because that's like this rivalry that I don't know why, but I'm kind of intrigued by like Smith is very good at the mic, so I hope someone pushes that. I'll say this about Smith: like, come in championship weight because opportunities happen, and who knows? Guy gets a cut, or these guys taking the fight short notice. Someone misses weight, or these guys are pretty professional. Both Payton and
Smith is a guy that comes in at 204 half the time for light heavyweight fights because it's just not hard for him to make weight.
Yeah, make sure you're on because I'm more worried about Payton making weight on feel really short notice than Prochazka. But who knows Prochazka? Like this guy could freaking just quit fighting because he wants to find Nirvana while swinging with orcas in Alaska or some shit, or Greenland.
And Prochazka is huge,
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like that's the kind of guy. Like all of a sudden, like, hey, where's Prochazka? Like I don't know. He went to fucking Greenland to find the friggin' purple marlin. That has a secret for him. I don't know. This fight, Anthony Smith, like he's always been a bad athlete, but he just makes up for it by being well-rounded and technical. He's a pressure striker. He's going to press the action. He's going to march down his foe. Though at his age, he does fight a little different than a couple of years ago. He fights at a more controlled pace, but it's still a higher pace now, especially for light heavyweight. He attacks with combinations. He's got nice, tight shots, a lot of variety in his attacks. The problem is he doesn't have much power. He's pretty much a point fighter at this point of his career. Not that it was even in his – I think he's a little past his prime. I don't think he was what he – his prime was when he was fighting John Jones for the title. Mm-hmm. He's more of a point fighter. Not that he was like this big cracker then. He throws a lot of kicks. He likes to end combinations with kicks, which I like. He's got some good calf kicks. Teep kicks are a big part of his game. You're kind of using those range. He has a lot of defensive issues, though. He's slowed down a lot. He's become very hittable. And, I mean, Anthony Smith has taken an ungodly amount of damage. Rakic was crushing his leg with kicks. I think about that Glover the Sheriff fight, the amount of damage he took in that fight. Obviously, John Jones. He will wrestle, but he's a lot more of like a BJJ practitioner who happens to wrestle. He's a submission threat. He's got all 16. He has 16 subs on his record. Excuse me. He just caught Victor Petrino with a beautiful guillotine. I don't trust his chin anymore, though. I mean, he's like you said, he's taking a lot of damage. He's been hurt a lot. No, he's insanely tough. He's tough. He's too tough for his. Remember when his teeth was falling out, in his mouthpiece? Because Jesus Christ, this guy's he's not human. I know some people hate Smith and when Smith's talking about it, but a lot of times people are asking him questions about Payton and he just answers honestly. But and I think he's like I said, I think he's a very good analyst.
Yes.
But he's become a villain. I'm like, this is the guy who's just taking God known damage for our entertainment, and people dislike this guy. It's weird. But anyways, so let's say again, moving up to light heavyweight isn't the issue. I mean, dude's not gonna be on the size. I don't know if he'll be bigger than Smith because Smith is a big boy, but like your point is like he won't be undersized. No, just see them face off and go, oh my god, he's so small. I actually expect his power to go with him. Like he might even be stronger at light heavyweight because he's not dehydrating himself. Now he isn't the most technical striker, but he is a power puncher. He throws a lot of hard hooks. His left hook being his best right. He loves his overhand right. Not very technical though. Like they're kind of wild. I mean, he looked really bad on the feet against Marvin Vettori and Jack Hermanson. His output was very bad against both, especially Hermanson. Again, being at middleweight, I think maybe moving up to the light heavyweight is better for him. He has hard calf kicks though, and he's one of the guys who does check leg kicks. He works well in the clinch. He can bully his opponents and kind of blast them away with some knees. He's a solid wrestler. If he's a really good grappler, if he gets to fight to the ground, he's a submission threat. He had an incredible calf slicer against Jack Hermanson. He's got some mean ground and pound. He's gassed down the pass, and that you're talking about him taking the fight on short notice. Moving up to 205 helps, but you know what? Like I don't know how much he's in the gym, but like he's probably doing cardio with Cheyenne Bice, So this is a tough one. I've flip-flopped on this one because I'm not high on either guy. Delite looks like the scariest dude alive. I mean, he looks the part of a guy. His striking's kind of, he's a power puncher, but it's not very striking, good. But I don't believe in Smith anymore. He had a nice run, but I feel like the Victor Petrino win was like a really good moment. He caught a guillotine, but I think it might have just prolonged the inevitable that he's past his prime and he's on his way out. Man, I don't even want to make a pick because I'm not confident, but I'm going to see Delite land some big shots, gets a takedown. I expect Delite, I'm with you. I expect Delite to be the underdog in this one. I thought he was going to be like plus 160. You know what? I'm going to say Delite gets him out of there. I'm going to say he lands some big shots, hurts Smith, and maybe lands some hard ground and pound, pins him against the cage, and just tees off on him. Give me, I'm going to say Delite in the first round. Give me Delite first round TKO.
All right.
Did I fucking have clue in that fight?
All right, we're taking.
I was opposite, dude. I was taking Oldberg to fucking starch him. Like I was picking Oldberg as like a holy shit moment.
Yeah.
Like people start asking the question: is he the best light heavyweight in the world?
I mean, and you were probably right.
But this one I have zero confidence in.
All right, you ready for Ortega versus Lopez?
And I'm glad that you said this too. Like you of the four, this is the one I'm least interested in.
Yeah, just
to me, all the pressure's on Smith. Like he has to
agreed.
Win.
Yeah, agreed.
If he loses, he's fucked. He just lost to a middleweight.
Yeah, and if it means the least, like even if he wins,
it means that's true. Good point.
Like Oldberg versus Smith. If Smith wins, you're like, well, shit, And if Oldberg wins, that's just another proof that maybe he's ready for a title shot. Because if the UFC can make Oldberg versus Pereira at some point, just the team rivalry, they got to do it.
Yeah, Oldberg looks the part. Yeah.
And Oldberg can do a little of this. Like,
yeah.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC 303, a featherweight matchup between former title challenger Brian Ortega and red-hot up-and-comer Diego Lopez. Ortega, the 33-year-old Californian, is 16-3 with 1 no contest overall. He's 8-3 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He's coming in off a win. He fought at UFC Fight Night, Moreno versus Royval, like UFC Mexico City, back in February, tapping out Yair Rodriguez in the 3rd round. That was a rematch of their 2022 fight, which ended prematurely due to a kind of weird shoulder injury to Ortega. So he got past Rodriguez in the rematch, showed definitively that he was the better man. Now he gets to face Lopez. 29-year-old Brazilian is 24-6 overall. He's 3-1 since joining the UFC out of season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series, where he actually lost. So he went and won a couple fights down here in Texas, of all places. Got signed on short notice to face Movsar Evloev. Dropped a decision there, but since then he is 3-0 with 3 finishes in less than 1 round worth of cage time, with a first round submission of Gavin Tucker, a first round knockout of Pat Zabatini, and a first round of Sadiq Yusuf in his most recent appearance, which was at UFC 300 back in April. So Lopez went from an afterthought to co-headlining one of the UFC's biggest cards of the year. It took a little bit of shuffling to get there, but he's apparently earned it hard enough that he is the favorite in this fight, as he is -140, Ortega +110 as your underdog. Keith, I'm going to flip this to you. I'm just going to say first that Brian Ortega is frustrating, man. He might be the most naturally talented fighter in the division. He just seems like one of the most talented fighters in recent memory, in that when he's on, it just all looks so effortless. But the guy said when he was still in his late 20s that he only ever wanted to fight twice a year because the weight cut was hard. And he literally said it cuts into my surfing time. It would be, well, it was the equivalent.
I get that.
Yeah.
This show cuts into my surfing time, so I get it.
Yeah. It's the equivalent of Nick and Nate Diaz saying that fighting got in the way of them doing triathlons and smoking weed. If those two guys were like top 3 guys in their division and in the prime of their careers, and Ortega has done himself one better than that, because he's become, rather than a twice-a-year fighter, more like a once-a-year fighter, and sometimes not even that. But when he's out there, he's still one of the better guys in the division. Does he keep his place in line against Lopez here, or does Lopez use him as a stepping stone and make such a fast run to the top at 145 pounds that we didn't think was possible, in the modern UFC? Like, we used to think you have to win a lot of fights in a row to get into the title picture 145. Lopez might be there if he beats Ortega, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. What a run he'd be on. Ben, more important question. You are a world traveler. You've lived all over this great world. Are you a surfer?
I am not a surfer.
Have you surfed at all?
No, like when I was a kid, I did like the little boogie board thing where you lay on your stomach on it like a little coward and go down the little pissy waves, and that's about it, man.
Yeah, I still do that with my kids. We go to the beach and pull out the boogie boards. I have surfed I've surfed one time in my life. I was so proud. I actually got up and surfed it in, and it was like a couple times, and I was like, wow. I did it at Waikiki Beach in Hawaii.
Oh, dang.
And me and my wife, for I won't say it was for her. We went away for her birthday. I won't say what her age was, but it was a significant milestone recently, in the last 2 years ago. And you go there. They have little like stands and they do lessons. I'm like, we're in Hawaii. Like, just let's go surf. And Waikiki Beach, fuck it. Like, I didn't think I'd even get up. I'd fall a couple times. But yeah, so we had this guy. I still remember. Me and my wife took a picture. His picture is on my. I should go get it. His picture's on my fridge right now. His name was Uncle Kevin. That was his actual name. His name was Uncle Kevin. That's what you're like. Oh yeah, with Uncle Kevin. He was the absolute stereotype when you picture like a Hawaiian guy who's like 50 years old. He's just like as bronze as possible, and just like, I think he wears no shirt more than he wears a shirt in his lifetime. The best thing was he'd get in there. And there's like when you're surfing in, people can't be in front of you, but the Waikiki Beach is fucking busy. Yeah. And we out pretty far, So we go up and he starts screaming at people, get out of the way, like super, super loud. And then as soon as they went, he go like, Uncle Kevin loves you. After he just like yelled at them. So me and my wife wouldn't crash into them. My wife is actually fantastic. Like, she could probably be a fucking professional surfer. She was like, I was proud that I wrote it in, but man, she was like going around people and shit. It was unbelievable. Anyways, back to this one. I was actually, when you said it, I was surprised Brian Ortega was a favorite. I'm assuming the underdog. Nothing against Diego Lopez. It's just Brian Ortega. I mean, he's a top 5 guy in the world who's coming off an incredible win.
Well, who has he lost to? Yair Rodriguez in a kind of injury shortened thing. and then Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski.
And they just avenged that loss to Rodriguez, submitted him.
If you want to tell me that Brian Ortega is the third best featherweight in the world right now, I might not agree, but I can't laugh at you.
Well, I mean, throw Topuria in there too, but yeah,
throw Topuria in there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I was surprised that I thought Brian Ortega was going to be like, I thought it'd be close. I just thought he'd be like a negative 165. And Lopez would be like, I don't know, plus 145 or something like that. Brian Ortega, I mean, this is such a fantastic. Even though I said that Garry and Michael Venom Page should be the co-main event, like that is not a diss on this fight. This fight is incredible. Like I'm really pumped for this fight. Ortega's a very big guy for the weight class. He's athletic. His striking has come like around so much, which now is the strength of his, or one of the strengths of his, I should say. He can fight out of both stances. He's a pressure striker, pops a good jab. I mean, I go back to that Korean Zombie fight where he was smashing him up with a jab. He attacks with combinations. He works the body well. He blocks shots by pillaring, which I'm not a fan of, and Volkanovski really beat him up to his, big Ortega's body up because of that, because he's covering up like this. He throws a lot of kicks. He throws a lot of kicks because he isn't worried about getting taken down. Like he wants you to catch his kick, but really what he wants, he wants you to catch his kick, and as you're taking him down, he's gonna jump and get you, or he's gonna hit an arm bar as soon as you hit the ground, or he's gonna sweep you or something. He likes clinch takedowns. He gets inside. What he loves to do, he loves to reach over someone's head and lock in a gi, like really slow, and you see it, but he's so good at it. He doesn't have much entries. He's more of like a snatch, like reaching over, snatch single kind of guy. But he has a Charles Oliveira, you said it earlier, like opportunistic style grappling, where he isn't the most decorated grappler. You go by credentials, but he needs one split second and he just jumps on that opportunity. One of the best submission artists of all time. He needs the smallest opening and then he ends the fight. He jumps at the opening. I mean, he isn't going to take the foe down and grind on him and then sub him. Like that's not his style. He's going to take you on and jump right to the submissions. He has some of the slickest back takes I've ever seen in UFC history. He has no problem pulling guard too. My concern with him is I'm worried about his durability. This dude's been in so many wars. We talked about Anthony Smith's toughness. He's right up there. Like, go back to this last fight against Jerry Rodriguez. He had to come from behind in that fight. Rodriguez was beating the brakes off him in the first round. Adding the guy that this guy's had tons of injury years. Dude, for freaking Pete's sake, the guy jumped in his fighter intro in his last fight and almost rolled his ankle. Remember that? Yep. Like, he's got some bad luck too. Now, but Diego Lopez, I like this kid a lot. I mean, he's also a big featherweight. He's well-rounded. He's super fast, explosive. He's got great hands, short, tight shots he throws, got a great straight right, beautiful left hook. He targets the body. He loves to throw it out of the pocket. I mean, he blasted Sadiq Yusuf when he was in the pocket with a really mean, short, tight uppercut. He showed against obviously against Sadiq Yusuf, like he's got crushing power. He also almost knocked out Musa Evloev in a very short. I mean, I think it's a fight on like days' notice, and almost knocked off Evloev. He really, the reason why he draws power, he really steps into his shots. He's got strong calf kicks. He still has some defensive holes, specifically in not moving his head enough. He's also not a strong offensive wrestler, but his defensive wrestling, like he looked really good against Pat Sabatini. I mean, he threw Sabatini on his head with a whizzer. And like I said, he's not the best offensive wrestler. Like, I mean, neither is Ortega, but he's a really good grappler, though. He's a BJJ black belt who's competed in some really good BJJ competitions. He's a serious submission. He's got he has 12 subs on his record. He changed sub tags together. I mean, that Evloev fight. I mean, he hit Evloev. He was like, we're talking about almost knocking out. He also almost subbed Evloev from one of the deepest arm bars and knee bars, and a bunch of other submissions that you can see. He did sub Gavin Tucker in their fight. The issue is his BJ. He plays BJJ off his back instead of trying to get up or sweep or something, and that is not the strategy you want to do against Brian Ortega. That said, like, I would never favor anybody over Brian Ortega in the grappling. But I will say this: it is not a gap that as big of a gap that people think it is. I mean, as far as prediction, this has got to be everyone's favorite fight, right? Like I said, like I wasn't dissing this fight. I mean, this is my favorite fight in the card. I love both guys. I think both guys are super well-rounded. I thought Ortega was going to be the favorite because I thought I was going to be trendy. I'm going with the upset. Actually, no, I'm not going with the upset. I thought this was the passing of the torch moment. Ortega's just too hittable. He's been hurt a lot, and Lopez hits hard. Ortega is insanely tough. I don't think he gets finished, but I think he gets hurt enough in a close fight. I do think Ortega will have his moments. I think he'll put Lopez in trouble at times. I think we have a back and forth contest. I just think Lopez's power might be the tiebreaker. Give me Lopez. I'll say split decision.
Yeah, and somebody on the preview comments a couple episodes ago gave us some crap because Keith picked like 6 or 7 split decisions on a card, and then that card.
I'm gonna beat that record. No, he was. I think he was busted balls.
Well, because on last week's Saudi Arabia card, the first 4 fights went to decision, and only one of them was unanimous. Like, it happens a lot. It's not that bizarre to think. Yeah, this.
I don't care about people. I love the people busting our balls. Yeah. I love it.
This is a hard fight to call. Like, Lopez looks like the truth, but he is good at a lot of the same things that Ortega has traditionally been super elite at. I like that you pointed out that Ortega's striking has come along. The trivia thing that I, always go back to when we preview Ortega fights is that he won his first 7 fights in the UFC. Like, the first one against Mike De La Torre was overturned because he tested positive for, some performance enhancer. But he won his first 7 fights in the UFC, which brought him all the way to his title shot against Max Holloway without winning a single round.
Yeah, that's fine.
He was losing those fights until he won, and that included 4 third-round finishes in a row. So that was 4 fights in a row where he lost 2 rounds and came back to win. And
I remember Moicano was one of them.
Yeah, Moicano was one of them. Guida was one of them, where he just destroyed. He timed Guida with he timed the takedown and just brained him. And that is not the guy who he is anymore, and it is mostly down to his striking. He did not have the striking to win rounds before. His output was too low. He didn't really have just basic bread and butter stuff like a jab, right cross, and low kick that you can kind of use to rack up damage. So he would be losing fights until the guy made one mistake or he got it to the ground and then it was over. The Ortega that beat Korean Zombie by outstriking him for several rounds simply didn't exist a few years ago. That's impressive, because it's tempting to take Ortega saying, yeah, I don't really want to fight more than twice a year just because it cuts into my other interests, and take that as him not being dedicated to his craft. And to some extent that's true, but a guy that's not dedicated to his craft doesn't make the kind of improvements that Ortega has made, especially after they're already an established contender and an established star. Like, he made improvements after he was already in the Modelo commercials. He is a sublime grappler. I don't know how he would stack up as, among the greatest grapplers in MMA history. Like, his resume is relatively short because of his sparse schedule, but at his best, he does stuff in fights that we typically only see in elite grappling competitions. Like, there's a reason that before he was even in the UFC, he was like this 20-year-old kid in the Gracie breakdown videos with Hieron and Henner Gracie. Well, 1, because he lives in Torrance, California, but 2, because he was like their destined golden boy, the good-looking 20-year-old Mexican-American kid that was an absolute wizard. And it's impressive how much that is carried over.
Yeah. He was their Victor Gracie.
Except that he actually tapped people out instead of just punching him 50 times, and then they carry him around on their back going jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Good old Victor Gracie. He's the equivalent of like a Michael Page, like making stuff work in MMA that we always kind of wished would happen, but normally only happens either in kickboxing or in movies about kickboxing. And yeah, he still has all that. It's not like he's fallen off. Like, he's lost to a couple of the best guys in the sport. you know, he came back from that injury layoff and like he had to come back, but he ended up soundly defeating the guy that, you know, he'd lost to due to injury. Like for all we know, Ortega's as good as he's ever been. But the few things he hasn't fixed, and I've talked around this for like 3 minutes now, and I'm finally getting around to, I think you made the biggest point. Despite all the improvements that Ortega has made as a striker, especially offensively, just he's learned to use his natural reach and fluidity, and has discovered that he has incredible power that's only helped when, you know, he throws with proper technique and sits down on his punches. He's still hittable, and Lopez is aggressive, throws lots of volume, and hits super hard. I think that's going to cost. I think that's going to cost Ortega in this fight. He's proven to be incredibly tough. I mean, he's walked through a lot of damage and managed to make it to the final horn. He went through 5 rounds of hell against Max Holloway. Volkanovski beat him up pretty bad. He took a lot of damage from Rodriguez, even in the fight that he won. I'm going to say he makes it to the final horn, but Lopez wins this unquestionably. And if it does go to the ground, I'm going to say Lopez probably holds his own. Ortega is one of the few guys in, hell, not just in this division, in the sport period, that I don't groan when he jumps a guillotine and falls to guard, because he can actually finish fights that way. Or even if he doesn't get the guillotine, it doesn't just mean that he's like lost the round, like he's that good a grappler. But I think he's going to have trouble if he even decides to, getting this fight to the ground on his terms, and against someone like Lopez that actually will cost him. So give me Lopez to win a decision here in, a passing of the torch moment that immediately catapults him into the title picture in a way that we thought was only possible at women's featherweight. With that, we come to the main event of UFC 303, a scheduled 5-round title fight between light heavyweight champ Alex Pereira and challenger Yuri Prochazka. Pereira, the 36-year-old Brazilian by way of Connecticut, is 10-2 overall. He is 7-1 in the UFC. He is 3-0 at light heavyweight. He started at middleweight, made it all the way to a title win over Israel Adesanya. He dropped the title to Adesanya in his first defense. Since then, he has moved up to 205 pounds, where he has captured another title. His wins at light heavyweight, a split decision over Jan Blachowicz, then a second-round knockout of Prochazka in their first meeting last November, and in his most recent appearance at UFC 300 this April, a first-round knockout of former champ Jamal Hill. Pereira and Prochazka step in on short notice to basically save this event. No one stands to gain more from this than Prochazka. The 31-year-old Czech is 34-1 overall. He is 4-1 in the UFC. Since his loss to Pereira in their first meeting last November, he appeared on the very same UFC 300 card back in April, where he knocked out Alexander Rakic in the second round. Prochazka thereby kept himself right in the immediate title conversation. It ended up coming a little more immediately than he might have expected, but he and Pereira willingly signed on the dotted line. Pereira, as you might expect of the defending champ and the winner of the first meeting, does come in as a moderate favorite. He's minus 170, Prochazka plus 140. Keith, it isn't the fight we thought we were getting. In some ways, it might be better. Obviously, as we said off the top, it doesn't have the same sizzle of the biggest star in the sport's history, but it's a rematch, and it's a rematch of a fairly recent fight. I mean, their first meeting was barely over 6 months ago. But to me, their first meeting, Pereira won. He deserved to win. He won by knockout. But it wasn't the kind of fight that made me go, okay, I never need to see them fight again. Like there are some even title fight or title picture fights where one fighter wins in a way where I go, okay, I don't need to see that again. Like, Cain Velasquez versus Brock Lesnar. Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey, where I'm like, okay, I've seen that. I have a pretty good idea how this would turn out if they fought 10 times. I don't feel as though I know how it will turn out if Pereira and Prochazka fight 10 times. I don't think they know. And that's what makes this exciting to me. I'm going to flip this to you. I mean, who do you think wins this? What do you think it looks like? Obviously, there are a ton of implications. You know, we still have Hill sitting on the shelf. We've got a kind of very active top of the top 10 that a lot of them have fought each other already. We can talk about the rest of the implications on the recap. I'm interested in your take on this fight, you know, who wins and how they get it done.
This is a good one. Like I said, I think this is as good as the UFC could have made based on the circs, based on obviously it's International Fight Week. You either need a title fight and a big one. You're not putting Raquel Pennington in, you know, International Fight Week, you know, supposed to be the biggest card of the year. Again, I know UFC 300 changed things, but generally on your normal years, not having 100, 200, 300, this is your biggest card of the year. So you need either a title fight with a big star, like one of your, you know, so who could have it been? It probably just came down to Pereira and Sean O'Malley, maybe. I don't know what his situation is, but you know, I know everybody else was either booked or, you know, or just fought, like Marcus have just fought, or so that's what I said. Or the big mega title, you know, title champion would be like just those standalone guys, your Conor McGregors. But who else is that leave? The people we've been saying about that are not coming back: Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, George St. Pierre, Habib. They're not coming back. So I think when you rank fighters in the UFC, okay. So I don't want to miss this point. One thing I will say about this matchup, why I am not as excited as other people. It's a fantastic matchup, so I want to be clear. But I would have much rather had Ankalaev just because I feel like he deserves it more, and because I just saw Prohaska fight Pereira, I'd rather have the new matchup. I know that wasn't available to them. I know Ankalaev wants to wait. I think there was like Ramadan issues and travel issues and everything. I understand that was an option. I'm just saying in a perfect world, I would rather have Ankalaev. And I know Ankalaev is not anywhere near as marketable as Prohaska is. I mean, his fighting style, his personality, he was one of the most cheered guys at UFC 300, which was crazy to me. That was star-studded. What I do want to talk about is when we talk about stars in the UFC, obviously, I know you get sick of me keep saying it, but like Conor McGregor is your biggest star. And when you start ranking the stars in the UFC, Conor's 1, John Jones 2. You know, I'm not doing the list, but I'm just guys coming in my head. Alex Pereira keeps moving up that list.
Yes,
3 or 4. I mean, you know, they keep saying, but just point this out like for a second. In the last year and a half or so, year and a half, this guy wins the middleweight title, not just wins the middleweight title, but by 5th round knockout in Madison Square Garden.
Yep.
1 year later, he becomes a 2, and I know he ended up losing the title in between, but I'm not going to go over his whole run. Yeah. But 1 year later, he wins the light heavyweight title, knocking out Yuri Prohaska at UFC 295, headlining a card in Madison Square Garden, right? And that one, remember, he's very opportunistic. That was supposed to be John Jones versus Steve Miocic.
Yep.
That one falls out, and then this one becomes the main event. Okay. UFC 300. We had every possible matchup to friggin' the Facebook guy and friggin' Elon Musk fighting each other. We had every what's that guy? Zuckerberg and Musk fighting. Yeah. We had every possible matchup you could think of as the headliner for UFC 300. Instead, it's Alex Pereira defending his title against Jamahal Hill and winning by knockout, and really cementing him as a light heavyweight champion, because there was this weird thing going on with light heavyweight where you had Yuri was the champ, they had to give up the title because of injury, and then Jamahal Hill wins the title but had to give it up for injury, and then he wins. Yep. But who he beats Yuri.
Yep.
Who had a claim. But there was still this other guy who had a claim, and Jamahal Hill. And then he defends that and beats that guy. So now there's no debate who's the champion. So in the year, it's win the middleweight title at Madison Square Garden, win the light heavyweight title at Madison Square Garden, headline UFC 300, and then, now I'm going to headline International Fight Week. I mean, this dude's he's rising faster than the freaking Hawk 2 girl, like his stardom. You know what I mean? And dude, I love it because this guy is just freaking short notice Iceman. I got broken toe against Jamel. I don't care. Supposedly he's still injured and he was just like this freaking tour of doing stuff, and he just like takes the fight and like it was like an Uber ride, and he's like, yeah, I'll fight. Like what, a week and a half from now, 2 weeks from now? Sure. International Fight Week. I love this dude. And let's not forget, this is New England zone. This is Southern New England zone.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, he's not from Maine or something. He's from Connecticut.
Southern New England.
Yeah.
You know,
you can tell from the accent. Yeah.
Yeah. He's always talking about it. He's wicked good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about his skills. I mean, I've said this before. He's one of the biggest dudes I've ever seen in my life. It gets one of the mysteries of the world how this guy made middleweight. It's like how did 20 clowns fit in one little small car? Like that's him making middleweight. It's fucking crazy. The guy is so
Alex, the clown car Pereira. I love it.
Yeah. When I see him when I saw him in person, I was like, and this one was fighting middleweight. Like, it's a mystery how he makes light heavyweight. He is huge. He looks like what's the guy's name there? I just saw him at PFL, the PFL heavyweight champion.
Renan Ferreira, like the
Renan Ferreira.
Yeah.
He looks like him. Renan Ferreira's like 6'7".
Yeah.
He's like they're the same size. They can like it is crazy how big this dude is. He is this absolutely incredible striker. I mean, his accolades in kickboxing is off the charts, but he's got quick hands. It's accurate, short, no tells, insanely explosive. You know, his left hook is like a deadly weapon. I've said it before. It should be illegal. I mean, ask his past opponents, including Yuri Prohaska. He doesn't have to be accurate. I mean, that he has that like Francis Ngannou, like he just has to grade you and he puts you out. I mean, he has so much power, and that's because he keeps his base right underneath him. I'm really starting to believe that he might be the pound for pound hardest hitter in the history of the sport. Pound for pound, obviously heavyweights I'd rank over him, but still, like pound for pound, this guy can crack. And then you add in this kicking game where he's got these insane calf kicks. I mean, he hurt Adesanya with calf kicks. Like I was talking about the first fight where Adesanya got knocked out. I'm talking about MMA, where he talked about the leg kicks of Pereira hurt him, and then go to the fight against Yuri. He was kicking out Yuri's legs, and it's funny. Like DC always talks about, it didn't even look hard. He just kind of flicks him out there, and just they hurt so bad. Now, for a guy such a decorated kickboxer, he's very hittable. He keeps his chin high in the air, and he pulls his head straight back, and he'll back himself up to the fence. And you got to worry about his durability as he's had this like long run in kickboxing, and he was somewhat recently knocked out by Adesanya. But he's one of the guys, like, you got to land on his chin, you're still coming in his range. Like, you're playing with fire. Like, he can battle in the clinch. He uses his size well in the clinch. He kind of like hangs on his opponents and tires them out. He then will start blasting to the knees. Now, the major hole of him is his defensive wrestling. I mean, it's not a sign to take him down, and take him down pretty easily. And Yuri took him down in their fight. He did show like that he loves downward elbows, and that you can't just if you shoot on him, you can't rest on his legs. He's going to drop those big things. But if you take him down, he struggles to get back up. He kind of just holds, and kind of hopes he gets stood up. But then eventually, due to his size, he'll kind of spring back up, kind of like a Derek Lewis type situation, where he waits, and then just waits for that small opening, he gets up. But obviously, it's long periods of time that he could be on the bottom. And like, we're talking about guys who take him out. He hasn't faced a wrestler yet. That's only one of the biggest concerns. He hasn't faced a true wrestler. Not that it really is anybody in that weight class, but and cardio has been an issue. I mean, like, go back to like the Jan Blachowicz fight. He won that fight, but it was like a 15-minute fight. It wasn't that high pace, and he was kind of gassing. Now, Yuri Prohaska, very athletic. Like, I always go back to the Dominic Reyes fight. Like, not many people can make Dominic Reyes look unathletic, and Yuri Prohaska can do that. I mean, I've described him before as just the guy flows. He can fight at both stances. He is very like unorthodox. He kind of darts around, herky jerky style. His awkwardness gets opponents to kind of back up and freeze, and then he attacks with like nonstop action. All of his movement kind of distracts, and then suddenly he springs in the pocket and he unloads with big shots. Like, I just talked about Alex Pereira being one of the hardest hitters. And I mean, Yuri Prochazka's earth-shattering power. I mean, the guy's got 26 TKOs, which is just absolute nuts. He really sits on his punches and generates powers. He has this attitude of just he'll bite down on the mouthpiece and just swing hard. I mean, look at the way he walked off Volkan Osimhen. Was a great KO. Look at the way he just knocked out Alexander Rakic. I mean, that thing was a thing of beauty. I like that he attacks the body. He butchered Rakic's legs with calf kicks before the knockout. Though he is open to calf kicking himself, like I mentioned, like Pereira was kicking up his legs. He isn't a great wrestler, or at least you don't think of him as a wrestler. But then you start looking at his stats, like, wait, he took down Dominic Reyes, he took down Rakic, he took down Pereira in their fight. He gets more takedowns you think. Now, his takedown defense is really bad. I mean, go back to Glover Teixeira. Glover Teixeira was taking down these. Though Glover Teixeira is a ridiculously underrated wrestler. We've talked about that a million times. But Yuri's hard to hold down. He caught Glover Teixeira in a submission, which is like an all-time incredible feat. Again, I think like he's got 3 subs. I still think it was more luck than anything. I am worried about his chin though. I mean, he's been hurt a lot. Like even the fights that he wins by knockout, he was knocked out by Alex Pereira. Yuri needs to turn this into a wrestling match. I know he's got this power. I shouldn't say needs. It would be the better avenue for victory if he turns it into a grappling match and wears him and tries to like, hey, this is a 25-minute fight. I'm playing the long game. They're trying to end it early. Now, he's got the power. Like he catches Pereira. It's not out of the possibility he just starches Pereira. But again, I don't think that's the right avenue. I think he will. I think he'll close the distance. And when I'm saying, well, I think he will close the distance and be grimy and try to get takedowns and try to wear Alex Pereira, maybe take him down for a while. But all Pereira needs is one opening and he ends the fight. That's what he does. And I think he does. I think he catches Yuri. I think he lands one little short shot, whether it be that left hook or something, or maybe he starts open up with leg kicks and then follows up with a big, one shot. I say he ends Yuri. I'm gonna say a little longer than last time. I'll see he does in the 3rd round. Give me Alex Pereira by 3rd round TKO.
I can't find a lot to disagree with there. Both of these guys have already accomplished a lot more than I ever thought they would in the UFC. Pereira, it's a very obvious thing where, they brought him in and it's like, okay, we're going to need to bring him to some sort of credible way to meet Israel Adesanya. He has accomplished so much more than we could have reasonably hoped. Like the high-end hope for him when, he got to the UFC in my book was, okay, he wins enough fights against the right people to make it to a title shot against Adesanya. He loses against Adesanya, but at least the UFC found something else for Adesanya to do to keep him from just getting bored and, wanting to keep moving up to 205 or going on a 3rd lap of beating the same contenders at 185. For him to have beat Adesanya, even if he lost the rematch, and then move up and win a title in another division and put away all the other people that had any sort of claim to the title, it's unbelievable. Like, it speaks to him because most people that cross over in earnest to MMA in their 30s after being world class at something else don't do as well as Alex Pereira. It speaks well of him. It speaks well of Glover Teixeira that obviously has just helped remake him as a fighter. But the same thing could be said to a lesser extent for Prochazka. When he arrived in the UFC, I mean, I was excited for it because he is awesome, but I didn't think he'd be a serious contender. Like, he's a guy that was just cranking up. Like, he was like, I feel bad saying this, like the last of the great Japanese MMA can crushers, where he racked up like 20 wins in a row, all of them by knockouts, but it would be fight one good fighter, one very good fighter, one terrible fighter, one good fighter, one very good fighter, one terrible fighter, and just kind of like Fedor did, where his streak was incredible, but when you're fighting that kind of rhythm, your preparation is different and your level of risk is different. So I thought, Prochazka will be a great source of highlights when he gets to the UFC, but he'll win 2, lose 1, win 2, lose 1, and rack up some bonuses. When he started crushing longtime top 10 fighters, I couldn't be more delighted. It was fantastic. We saw these guys fight. We saw them fight about 6 months ago, and while it didn't leave me saying, okay, I never need to see these guys fight again, their relative strengths and weaknesses are pretty much the same as they were. And Prochazka's big problem as far as this matchup goes is that he's very hittable. Like, he's incredibly potent offensively, just crushing power, incredible speed, just enough of the weird exotic stuff. Like, he does love his spinning things, but he's not Johnny Walker out there. But behind it all, he himself is very hittable. Like, obviously Pereira cracked him, but Glover Teixeira caught him clean a few times. And while Teixeira is, you know, a historically underrated wrestler and topside grappler, his boxing had faded pretty badly by 2022. And he was a good bit smaller than Prochazka, and he still caught him clean, like, more than you would like. In some ways, this is a derby to, you know, who finds the other guy's chin first. Because, you know, Pereira can be knocked out with one hard shot as well. Prochazka can absolutely land one. But between the two of them, Pereira is a little more defensively sound. He's probably the harder hitter, though. Again, I don't think it makes that big a difference. If either of them catches the other cleanly on the chin, it's over. Just, yeah. I think if these guys fought 10 times, Pereira probably wins 7 or 8 of them. All 10 end in a knockout. You know, like, it's not like Prochazka has no chance. And the one thing is, you mentioned his best route to victory is, you know, if he were to wrestle. Like, he's not a great wrestler, but his offensive wrestling is weirdly opportunistic. Like, it never looks like he's planning on it, but when he sees the opportunity, he's actually very good at getting it. And Pereira's takedown defense is terrible. And I think Prochazka will try. Like, he's not stupid. He knows that if he goes 0-2 against Pereira, he's stuck in that. He's out on the outside looking in, like so many other top contenders in the UFC are right now, because they have 2 losses to the champ. So if he understands that that's his best route to victory, I think he'll try it. Just, I don't know if he'll get it or get it soon enough or often enough to make a difference. I think Pereira, knowing that Prochazka needs that, is watching for takedown attempts. He's got the intercepting knee and the uppercut ready. He goes to work on Prochazka's legs right away. I mean, you mentioned that a couple guys have had success against Prochazka with calf kicks. Pereira took Prochazka all the way off his feet with one in the first round of their first fight. I could see that happening again. Yeah. I don't think Pereira is a 10 times better fighter than Prochazka, but I think it is a bad matchup for Prochazka. Give me Pereira by first round knockout here. And that is it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 303, Pereira versus Prochazka 2. I have been Ben. He has been Keith. If this is your first time checking out one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring you as good a mix of actual in-depth analysis and occasional talk about the best surfers in Rhode Island that you get anywhere in this business. Please do like, subscribe, drop us a comment. None of those things cost you anything, and they make our bosses happy and allow you to keep getting this content from us for free. Keith and I both man the comment section. We have a bunch of friends there that we do enjoy going back and forth with about these fights. But join us for the recap. We'll be live right after this main event on the Sherdog YouTube page. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll talk about all 13 of these fights, talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We'll talk about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers. And we will talk with you, because the live chat is open that whole time. So we're taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights as well, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, enjoy these fights.
To the sea. Make your bed of fairy tales while you're hunting for